Welcome into the Monday edition of Hot Mic with Hutton and Withrow across the OutKick Network. I'm Chad Withrow, your host. What a weekend it was. What a Monday it will be on the show. Lots of great things prepared for you today. We got a lot to get to. No Jonathan Hutton today. He'll be back with us on Wednesday. He may join us by Zoom for a bit later this hour, so we'll recap a bit of the weekend with Jonathan Hutton coming up. Lots and lots of football to come on this show. We have a saying that goes back many years that says, let's bang hats. And it's very simple. When you play a football game, you bang hats. That is the purpose of this show. We're going to get after it. We're going to give you a fun, entertaining look at the weekend and the week ahead all throughout today. Tim Brando, one of our favorites, Timmy B, will join us coming up a little bit later to talk college football and the game he did this past weekend. He's also got an interesting take on Coach Prime in Colorado that we'll get into with Timmy B coming up a little bit later. Bobby Carpenter, he's got 1,000 shows. We're one of them. We're thrilled about that. He'll come on to talk Big Ten and college football at 4:40 Eastern time today. And Mark Harris from OutKick.com. We'll talk about the Ryder Cup. It was my dumpster fire of the week on Friday. Got better over the weekend, but the result is still the same. The Europeans win it, and the Americans have not won a Ryder Cup on European soil since 1993. But let's open the show today by talking a little football. Davey Hudson's going to be alongside here momentarily as well. Big question after 1 month of football. Who is the best team in college football? It was a long month. 5 Saturdays. We are 5 weeks down to the football season. May make some of you sad to hear that. It certainly does me. But I also look back and think, what did we really learn about college football in that first month? I think the SEC is an interesting case because I don't really know much of anything. I'm left with more questions than answers after a month of football. You can make the argument across the country is the same way. Easy to sit here and say it's Georgia. They're the 2-time defending national champion, and they haven't lost yet. And I can agree with that. By default, I think it might be the Georgia Bulldogs, but there's a case to be made for Michigan, for Ohio State, for USC, for a number of other programs across the country. So who is the best team in college football? You can hit us up, by the way, watch on YouTube, hit us up on X, however you want to communicate with the show. Let us know what you think about who is the best team in college football right now. Davey, I look around the nation, and I think there are maybe 2 or 3 great teams in college football this year. But outside of that, I don't really know what we have right now.
Yeah, it's a really good question because you can look at it from a couple of angles where I can find faults with all these teams that received a first-place vote, whether you're looking at Georgia, Michigan, Ohio State, Texas, or Florida State. And the big thing for me is no one's separating themselves from the pack. And the reason I think Georgia right now is number one is just simply because they haven't lost a game since the SEC championship against Alabama in 2021. And I understand if you want to beat them or if you want to be on top, you got to knock off the king. And right now, no one's been able to do that. But Auburn came close to doing it this past weekend. And Texas, I mean, right now, if I would have to just use the eye test, I would say they're doing it based off at least the schedule they've attempted to play at this point.
You know, it's like college football, I think especially, and this is not the same case in the NFL. We'll talk about the NFL here coming up. But we look at history so much with these programs, and I hear Texas is the best team in the country, and I'm thinking, oh, here we go again. Do we have to talk about Texas again? Do we have to hear about Texas again being a national championship contender? We've been hearing that Texas is back for years and years, whether that's the case or not. It hasn't been. Since they won it all in 2005, played for a national championship in 2009, then lost to Alabama. But if we're just judging it by the merit of what we've seen on the field and rosters, Texas might be it this year. You're right. I mean, they may be the best team out there. When I look at both lines of scrimmage, quarterback play with Quinn Ewers, Worthy and some of their receivers, some of the best in the country, they've got talent top to bottom, and they're as balanced as anyone else out there. But there is this thing, and I kind of love it with college football. We look at every team not based on the merit of this season or what they're doing this year. We naturally put a spin of history on it, and that's just part of the sport. We don't do it as much in the NFL. With some franchises, we hesitate to say anything good about them based on history, but not often. Usually it's just, hey, this is what they've done. This is how they've looked. This is their record. We're going to assess based on that, and nothing else matters. I do think that in college football, part of it does matters. Part of it matters with the history, with what we've seen from that coach, what we've seen from those teams. But, Davey, I'm with you. I think Texas is right up there. Another team I want to bring to the table as a possibility, the Michigan Wolverines. If you want to look at a tale of two different road trips this past weekend, look at Georgia at Auburn and then how Michigan handled Nebraska. Now, I know what everybody's thinking. Auburn's a little bit better than Nebraska. That may be the case. May not. I don't think Auburn's that good either this year in year one of Hugh Freeze. But Georgia now twice has looked not very impressive. Bad first half against South Carolina, came back and won pretty easily. Right down to the wire at Auburn. Meanwhile, Michigan goes to Lincoln and just houses the Huskers in that game. Are we sleeping on Michigan a little bit when we're looking at some of the best teams?
I say no. I think they're obviously in the conversation, but they've played one of the easiest schedules you could think of. And the biggest reason why people aren't giving them that credit that's probably warranted at this point is just because they've continued to schedule cupcakes. And, I mean, you just mentioned Nebraska. It's like Nebraska is one of the worst Power 5 programs there are right now, like across the entire college football landscape. I just am not at that point to where I just need to see them play a big boy. Once they play a big boy, I will give them their due. And if you want to look at the other side of that and just being like, well, they were able to do this without Jim Harbaugh as far as those first 3 games, it's like I think that just puts more credit to the point of saying, like, yeah, they're not playing anybody. Yeah,
it's hard to assess at times with a team like that. I will say, this probably isn't fair, but I think the Pac-12 almost crosses each other out right now at the very top, because it's hard for me to say, this team is the one. I'm going to continue riding with a team, and I want to talk about them now that I've been high on since the preseason. Washington. I think Washington is maybe the one that we're really sleeping on that could be the best team in the country right now. That's also another program that people automatically hear and think, oh, come on. Washington's not going to do anything. They're not the one. Davey, I'm not so sure. I think this Huskies team's really good.
Michael Penix Jr. is definitely in the running to win the Heisman, and if you look at how they've been able to just take care of their opponents, I'm right there with you, Chad. It's another team that needs to be in the conversation. The big thing for them is you will definitely know whether they are legit or not just based off how their schedule starts to set up as we hit the month of October and then going deeper into conference play.
So let's talk a little bit about USC, because it's the defense, once again, that's a problem for them. It looked just like Oregon. Look at a repeat of the week before for Colorado. USC jumps all over Colorado in this game. They're up big. I think it's 34-7 at one point. They have to hold on for dear life to win it 48-41. Now, the transitive property doesn't always work in sports. In fact, it rarely works. But when I look at performances between Oregon and USC versus Colorado and see how Oregon's defense could clamp down on Colorado in that game versus USC, that is a sieve once again, that is cause for concern. Now, the difference is USC has the reigning Heisman Trophy winner at quarterback, and while Bo Nix is a great quarterback for Oregon, he's not Caleb Williams. But I got to give Deion Sanders some credit in this game. That was a gutsy effort in the second half because, I mean, things really changed in that Oregon game with the great story and the good tidings of Colorado football winning, surprising everyone, and then losing like that, and to come back and get way down again and have the ability to come back, and so much of it is Shedeur Sanders, who's terrific at quarterback. That's still an impressive comeback for Colorado to make that game interesting. But in the end, it's USC. But, Davey, I think USC kind of goes into that mix of top Pac-12 teams that someone's going to separate themselves. It might be the Trojans, but I think the defense is going to prevent that.
Chad, during SEC Media Days, we were talking with Gary Danielson, and he made a point talking about Tennessee and how their offense is built around just their team is built around that offense, and the lack of defense is something that hurts them. I think Alex Grinch is a great defensive coordinator with USC, but for whatever reason, it's not necessarily translated on the field. And for the same thing that Gary said about Josh Heupel's offense, I think you could put the same thing on Lincoln Riley's offense, and that, these teams are always going to be able to score points, but if you always get yourself in a shootout, there's a very good chance you're not going to be at that championship level, especially whenever you are playing that top-tier talent that they're going to have to go through whenever they get into the Pac-12 championship, because I think they'll ultimately make it. But we look at it, last couple of years, Utah has had their number. And what do we know about Utah? They love to play defense, and they can shut you down, and they've done that exact same thing to Lincoln Riley the last several times they've faced off. And I think we're going to see that happen again come this season.
So let's get into some NFL reaction from over the weekend and some of the biggest storylines. Pretenders and contenders, Davey, coming off the weekend. I'll start with my biggest pretender, and this is always going to be weighted heavily with preseason expectation and what we think individually about teams and how we've been proven wrong. The Pittsburgh Steelers are proving me wrong because I thought they were going to be good. And I thought Kenny Pickett was going to be the next star quarterback in the NFL. Now, we're going to talk about Mac Jones, the Patriots, a little bit later. I think he's better than Mac Jones, but he's not good enough. And what Mike Tomlin had to say postgame after that embarrassment against the Texans, where they get whipped, that everything isn't good enough right now. He is spot on correct. That was a miserable performance by the Steelers. And this is now half of their games so far this year. They have no-showed. They got smacked in the face by the 49ers in week 1, could do nothing. You've got DeForest Buckner and 49ers players almost clowning them after the game, saying, man, I kind of wish they'd moved the ball a little bit so we could get a break. I mean, that's bad. And now you've got a game against C.J. Stroud, rookie quarterback for the Texans, where they get whipped again. Their saving grace might have been Nick Chubb getting injured and the ability to win that game in primetime on a Thursday night against Cleveland. But I look at that division now, and there's another team that's falling apart in the AFC North as well. But I see Ravens, I see the Browns defense, and if Deshaun Watson is healthy again, and then I see the Steelers probably tied for last in that division right now. And Davey, I thought they were going to be taking the next step this year. To me, that is the biggest pretender so far of this NFL season. Who's your pretender?
My biggest pretender right now is a team that's actually leading the NFC South, but the Tampa Bay Bucs are 3-1. They had a big win over the New Orleans Saints, and the Saints have been a team that have had their number for the most part over the last several years. Even whenever Tom Brady was there, the Saints seemed to find a way to beat the Bucs outside of the one playoff game that really mattered. But I look at this, I think Baker's done a really good job so far this season, but I just can't see them sustaining this level of play. And you kind of you talk about it with the Steelers, Chad, and how it's that they don't have that X factor that's going to be able to keep them just take over a game. And whenever I see that with this Bucs team, like they're just playing average across the board, and they find a way to win these games, but just nothing is really standing out as a reason as to why I should feel confident investing in this team to make a deep run. And again, I know last year the NFC South was one that had a losing record making the playoffs. I think that was right. They might have had one team at 9-8 or something like that.
No, they were really bad last year.
It's been bad, and everyone's like, wow, the Bucs, they've kind of come out of nowhere this season, leading that division. It's not a good division, and they're not exactly a team that I'm willing to invest in over the long haul. And I ultimately don't even think they'll win the division when it's all said and done.
So Bob on the YouTube chat says, Mike Tomlin is the most overrated coach in the NFL. I'm a Steelers fan, and I can't stand Tomlin. I look at the Steelers, and I think that might be the one X factor. You said, Dave, they don't really have an X factor. That's it. That's a problem, though, when your head coach is the X factor and the organization itself. We value the Steelers because you're a Steeler when you're a part of that deal. And Mike Tomlin does have a reputation. They have an identity. They don't have the players right now that's conducive, especially on offense, to be that team that they need to be. Biggest contender, and someone in the YouTube chat brings up the fact that Kelly in Vegas was all over this one as a moneymaker, betting on the Buffalo Bills against the Dolphins. Dolphins come off a 70-point performance, and the Bills take it to them this week, Davey. That's my contender so far. That first week hiccup against the Jets when Aaron Rodgers went down, outside of that, they've been damn near perfect.
I like that one, and you talk about Kelly being right on that. That's crazy about that trend where teams score or beat a team by 50 points. Like that next week, they are not covering, and I think it was around like 30% of the time. And it was a dominating performance from the Bills. They've got that offense going, and it looks like one of those things. I wouldn't necessarily call the Dolphins a paper tiger, but they definitely have issues on that defense they need to get straightened out. For me, Chad, you can call this a cop-out, but I just watched this team, and it is the most complete team from top to bottom when you're looking across the National Football landscape, and it's the San Francisco 49ers. They moved to 4-0, and they're doing it with a guy that was the last pick of the draft, Mr. Irrelevant. People were always kind of curious, could he keep it rolling into this season, especially after the issues with the elbow, having surgery? And he is just, Brock Purdy is playing like a franchise-level quarterback that I could see being there for the next decade. He's not making mistakes. He's just taking care of the ball, and he's been incredibly accurate across the board. Now, it helps whenever you have a guy in Christian McCaffrey that I think is definitely in the running and right now the leader in the clubhouse to win MVP. The guy's just set the record for most consecutive games with a touchdown in San Francisco history over Jerry Rice, who's a Hall of Fame, a great, and I don't see any reason why they're going to be slowing down anytime soon. The defense is elite. The offense looks elite. And they've even got a rookie kicker who's yet to miss. So,
well, let's quickly get into no one's contender. And the 49ers are terrific. You're spot on with that one. The Chicago Bears are not. That is a train wreck. And the only question now is not if, but when Matt Eberflus is going to be fired. They play on Thursday night, so the short week prevents it from happening this week. I would look for something maybe next Friday. Going into that long week before their next game for the Bears to be replacing their head coach, much like they mysteriously have to replace their defensive coordinator after he resigned amid some sort of scandal that the clock is still ticking. No one's reported on still, and I have no idea why. Alphas and betas from the weekend coming up next. This is Hot Mike with Hutton and Withrow.
Hello, good morning, everybody. Welcome on into OutKick the Morning. I am your host, Charlie Arnold. Now, when it comes to race baiting in sports, no one does it better than ESPN. It's one of the reasons I was frustrated while working there. And now the Disney-owned company is out to prove just how overwhelming racism really is in the world of sports. Later this month, ESPN Plus will debut a new series on their streaming platform called Skin in the Game with Dr. Ibram X. Kendi. Now, if you aren't familiar with Kendi, he is a so-called anti-racist. He's a writer who makes a living trying to prove just how racist everybody else is. One of his books defines racism as referring to policies and ideas that create or permit any differences in outcomes in racial groups, to which I think it's clear racism goes both ways these days. But that's not a double narrative you will find in this series. Instead, the first episode will focus on Black athletes who use public platforms to protest injustices and what it costs to speak up. And in the second, why Black female athletes are considered polarizing when they prioritize their mental health, just as a few examples. Now, I appreciate highlighting athletes who have done incredible things in the world of sports, whether they are Black, white, Asian, Latin, or otherwise. But using Ibram X. Kendi to lead this series just feels like a setup. Is he going to mention that in these episodes, there was an occurrence in 2016 where Colin Kaepernick wore socks to a 49ers practice that showed cartoon policemen done up as pigs? Now, this even being prior to Kaepernick's sit-down of the national anthem during San Francisco's August preseason game. Or will they mention how in 2022, former ESPN anchor and sports analyst Jemele Hill famously called Trump a white supremacist and his voters all racist? Until the documentary airs, we can only ask one question. Will it be fair and balanced? Seems highly unlikely. Now, considering the host, handpicked by ESPN, he has incited his own racist remarks against people that don't look like him in the past, so I don't see how any way, in any shape, any form, this is an unbiased series. Now, speaking of the past, once upon a time, guys, I also worked for the Fox station in Indianapolis, and I covered the Colts. One of the guys I covered in that locker room, former NFL safety Sergio Brown, who went on to play for 6 years in the league. When I met him, he was talented, he was smart, and an all-around very, very pleasant guy. So I was startled to come across headlines 2 days ago that his mother had been murdered and that he was nowhere to be found. Then yesterday, the story got even weirder. From an Instagram burner account, which seems to belong to Brown, a video was posted of Brown making some very, very bizarre claims. Check it out.
I got it. Dorian. P. Sherman.
There's something going on with the stream.
Sydney.
It's going.
Oh my gosh! I can't. Just keep swimming. Just keep swimming. What the missing? They ain't never seen Finding Nemo. What the is going on? This is traumatic. Lucky I know how to say a joke. You
can hear him say he thought his mom was on vacation and the FBI and Maywood Police Department in Illinois had kidnapped him. This is a part of the video that you didn't see, but he goes on to make very, very weird claims. He also talks about fake news. I mean, it's clear Sergio Brown has lost it. And making it even worse for Sergio, one of his mom's neighbors told a local news station that police told him that they saw Brown through the door's Ring camera and light a bonfire to burn his mother's clothes.
Hot Mic with Hutton and Withrow across this OutKick network. Thanks for watching, listening, however you consume the show. It sounds odd to say someone consumes the show, but I guess that's what you do. So whether it be on our radio network, on YouTube, on Twitter, on Facebook, wherever, we appreciate you. And it's kind of like Olive Garden. When you're here, you're family. That's how we're going to treat you. Sometimes that means, giving you a slight kick in the ass when you need it, right? You got to do what you got to do. It can be love. It can be hate. It can be a number of things here on this show. I'm Chad Withrow. Jonathan Hutton back with us later in the week, possibly this hour, trying to figure out a slight Wi-Fi issue. Hutton may be at the one hotel that does not offer Wi-Fi at this point, so we may have to ask him about that coming up. Davey Hudson's alongside, though, as we continue to roll along on this show. Hey, speaking of love and hate, every Monday on Hot Mic, we award our alphas and betas of the weekend. Let's start with the good. Alphas of the week. We begin with the Michigan Wolverines. What a performance on the road in Lincoln. They don't have their head coach for the first 3 weeks of the season. Doesn't matter. They roll against inferior competition. Jim Harbaugh comes back. They have a slightly sluggish start against Rutgers at home, but they eventually roll 31-7 in that game. Now they go on the road for their first test, hostile environment. Yeah, Nebraska has no offense. They're not that good. But all Michigan does is roll up the Huskers and get up big early and never look back. They made Nebraska look like an FCS opponent in this game. Davey, I am super impressed with Michigan so far this year. And from what we've seen in college football 5 weeks in, it's not easy to go on the road and dominate someone. Hell, it's not easy to go on the road and win, period. And what they did to Nebraska, and look, I get it, Nebraska not good. That was still a really good performance for Michigan to go on the road, flex muscle to that extent, and dominate the Huskers the way they did compared to some other big-time teams in the top five that didn't necessarily look the same way. I'm talking to you, Georgia. Kudos to Michigan for doing exactly what they needed to do in that game.
Again, it's just another complete performance by a team that was going up against an inferior opponent, but it was really 45-0 until Nebraska hit one run for 74 yards and a touchdown there with like 4 minutes left to go in the game. 75% of Nebraska's run yards came on that one play. Michigan was just shutting them down, and you look at it, it's a team that nothing really jumps out. If you're just like looking in the stat sheet, it's like, oh, did they have one player go off? No, just the team from top to bottom. They're not really having to throw the ball around too much. J.J. McCarthy just methodically going through it. It's a team that I don't anticipate losing or even being in a game where they might lose until they face off against Ohio State. I think they're much better than Penn State. I don't even think Penn State's going to give them a game. So we'll see what happens. But right now, yeah, they're definitely an alpha, Chad.
Yeah, it's really impressive. And quarterback play. You are as good as your quarterback with all these teams. J.J. McCarthy and his ability to run and throw. And there's a little, how should I describe it, a little Stetson Bennett to his game, a little playmaker. Speaking of alphas, someone that I feel like when the game is in the balance, he's going to do things to help his team win. So I love that about him. And for that reason, Michigan is definitely one of our alphas of the weekend. Second alpha of the weekend, I think we may have Jonathan Hutton available with us. I'll get the thumbs up here momentarily to make sure he's good to go. But it's the Buffalo Bills in the NFL. Hey, no one wrote off the Bills when they lost that Week 1 game against the Jets, that ugly game after Aaron Rodgers goes down with the Achilles injury. They blew their opportunity in that one. That should have been a win for the Bills. That should have been a game that they take care of. But Josh Allen started having turnover problems again in that one. Since that point on, they've looked unbeatable. As much as the 49ers have every single week, the Cowboys were up until that Cardinals game. That has been the Bills since that opening week hiccup against the New York Jets. They have looked terrific. They're one of the alphas of the weekend. Jonathan Hutton's always an alpha. He's got an outstanding backdrop right now. He's doing some work on a charity event down south right now, and he's got the backdrop to prove it. He's on with us right now. Hutton, you're looking like an alpha yourself with that backdrop. I love it. Looks beautiful.
Well, the alpha was prior to just joining you, Chad, because you could see the skyline behind me. I don't know if you can now because it's all washed out once I sat down, but we got it going through the connection here. And, yeah, down in Tampa with Logan Ryan, former Patriot and Titan and Buccaneer defensive back who has a great charity organization and foundation with the Ryan Animal Rescue Foundation. So he's asked me to host this every year, and here we are again.
Will Tom Brady be in attendance, Hutton? Do you have confirmation on that yet? Do you know?
All I know is on the rundown I have for tonight in the live auction, Logan and I will be on stage. There is a Brady jersey, and in parentheses it says, will be signed by Tom. Okay. That's all it says. And Logan has not told me one way or the other.
I was hoping on your script it just said Brady jersey giveaway, parentheses, hold for applause, because Brady's going to come in the curtain behind and Jonathan Hutton's going to introduce him. Well, great work with that either way. I know Logan does a terrific job with that awesome. All the time. So really cool. You get an opportunity to help that out, and good of you to come on the show today with us to help us open up as well.
Of course.
We're in our alphas and betas of the week. I've gone through the Michigan Wolverines, who dominated at Nebraska over the weekend. The Buffalo Bills, who since that opening week loss has been dominant throughout. My third alpha of the week, a little bit of a different one, but I was watching this game live and have to give a shout-out to Bru McCoy of Tennessee. The USC transfer has been a great player for Tennessee, and more than anything else, he carries an alpha mentality when he's playing. He plays bully ball on the outside as a big physical receiver. Horrific leg injury over the weekend, one that Joe Milton, the quarterback, and a few offensive linemen immediately had to turn to not get sick on the field when they saw it. I noticed it immediately on TV. I don't know if you did as well, but I'm looking down and I'm like, yes, that's not right. The way the leg was turned was not the right way when you could see him on the ground in pain. But he gives the thumbs up to the Neyland Stadium crowd on the way off the field, had a message for the fans also. Praying for him, wishing him a speedy recovery, but alpha move to give the fans a thumbs up after a horrific injury like that.
Yeah, and I mean, and how he got to Tennessee through the portal and the long wait that everything, how it took place with the NCAA, which so many players know all about that. Look,
yeah,
it sucks. It sucks. You know, he was the alpha of the receiving group coming back this year. He's the Juwan Jennings, for those familiar with the 49ers receiver, who's certainly familiar with all SEC fans.
Even wears the same number as Juwan Jennings.
Yeah, exactly. And same mentality. You know, you mentioned the grinder, the bully ball type mentality for a wide receiver. He's got that. And just in the immediate moment, the replacement of him is not going to be on this roster. That's what sucks. And they were starting to get him the football. So that's in the immediate. In the long term, he's going to end up in the league. Here's hoping that the recovery goes as smooth as it possibly can. And it sucks for a guy that was a diehard football dude. And that's what you want at certain positions. You need one of those guys at receiver on every roster.
Yeah, and if that comeback's with Tennessee next year, trying to prove to NFL scouts that he's come back from the injury, great. Or if it's in the NFL, I just hope he gets to come back and play football again. My guess is he comes back to Tennessee to show that he can do it and then moves on, but we'll see. Surgery happened yesterday.
And it's perfect to pair with a speedy guy, right? Like He's the bruiser. You need the quick guy, the quick routes, the sprinter. Tennessee had that a year ago. They had the trio, and he needs the right pairing. He would be perfect through the portal to pair with another wide receiver that Heupel could potentially bring in.
So let's get into the betas of the week. Again, we're a family here on this show. Sometimes family, got to give a pat on the back, a little hug, a little side hug, a little fist bump. Sometimes you got to give them a smack in the face, maybe even a punch in the face. I don't know what type of family you're in if you're watching or listening. Sometimes you got to punch your family members, right? We're going to punch some people right now because we're going to award our betas of the week. I'm going to start with an obvious one. Matt Eberflus of the Bears. What an absolute train wreck of a season this has been. And even in the moment that it looks like, the Bears are going to break through and Sean Payton is going to be the ultimate beta of the weekend, going to 0-4 after all that trash talk throughout the offseason. No. Matt Eberflus and the Bears have something else to prove, and every time they're proving something, it's bad. They're 0-4, and Hutton, I think the short week playing on a Thursday night is the only thing keeping Matt Eberflus employed as of right now.
Well, and the Bears. I mean, the Bears have never fired a coach in the middle of the season ever in the history of that long franchise. So that's also part of it. But Chad, you're right. I mean, a defensive-minded coach, first 2 years of Justin Fields' career in the league, he's paired with Matt Nagy, who was dead man walking. For whatever reason, Chicago brought him back for his rookie season. Then they bring in a defensive-minded coach in Eberflus, who needed a year before he got to the level of free agency that was needed to pair players around the Bears franchise quarterback. And they do that through trades with guys who don't want to be there. And they've done that through draft picks that either haven't panned out or need some time to come along. And they've done that to some degree. They went heavy on tight end. They bring in more, of course, with their trade with Carolina. But that's few and far between for what they need. And a bad Denver Broncos team beat a really bad Chicago Bears team and a really bad head coach. Good defensive coordinator. Things have not gone in Eberflus's way, and it's not all his problem. We should also throw that in, Chad, but it's also not on Justin Fields either. And they've got to get that right. And to get that right, they need to go get the right head coach, an offensive-minded head coach that knows Justin Fields' style and will utilize his skill set.
So I'm watching this game live yesterday afternoon, Eagles, Commanders, and the whole ending of the game was beta by both teams to me, back and forth. Let me unpack this for a second.
Yep.
So they cut over for bonus coverage during the afternoon. There's about 2.5 minutes left. The Eagles have it set up where they could just run the ball, get 10 or 15 more yards, and have a chip shot extra point field goal at the buzzer to win the game. Instead, they elect to throw deep on, I think, 1st and 10 or maybe 2nd down. No timeouts for the Commanders. 1:49 left. They connect with A.J. Brown for a touchdown. Okay, fine. But you are giving the Commanders time to go down and tie it, cutting them a break. Because at that point, it looked to be over. It's an NFL kicker. You're going to have a short field goal if you just run the ball forward 3 times and let the clock run out. Instead, they score with 1:49 left. And then A.J. Brown tosses the ball to the defender on the ground and gets a 15-yard taunting penalty. That leads the Commanders taking over at their own 45-yard line. They work it all the way down to, I think, the 6 or 7-yard line. 2 seconds left in the game. They throw a touchdown pass to Jahan Dotson. And then, instead of electing to go for 2 in the win, Ron Rivera trots out his field goal kicker, and they kick the extra point. Post-game, now the Eagles go on to win in overtime. Post-game, Hutton, Ron Rivera says, we wanted to. Our guys were gassed. Our guys were gassed after that last drive. And I'm thinking, what? They're too gassed to run 1 2-point conversion play to win the football game after scoring with 2 seconds left on the clock? Beta. Nick Sirianni, beta move to throw the ball in the end zone there. A.J. Brown, beta move to get a 15-yard penalty after scoring the touchdown with that much time left. Beta move to not go for 2. It leads to an Eagles win, but it was mismanaged throughout in the end of that game.
Feels like, to me, Ron Rivera is trying to keep his job by playing it safe, and he's going to lose his job by playing it safe. You have They have Eric Bieniemy as their offensive coordinator. To me, that's a logical choice for interim head coach because it gives the Commanders, whenever they fire Rivera midseason, it gives the Commanders the exact opposite perception across the league than what they were for the last decade plus and really the last offseason. Just keep that in mind. That's number one. Rivera's playing it safe. That's not how you keep your job if you're him, based on new ownership and based on what the Harris Group has said they want to see, which is ultimately they've got to win. And they're not doing that. They're close, but they're not winning at a consistent rate. That's going to end up costing him his job. That's number one, is just from the losing end of it. Number two, Philly's not playing their best ball, but they continue to win. And while some of the top teams are going to get some stupid penalties, AJ's penalty was ridiculous. And they've got to overcome stuff like that throughout the game to be as consistent as they want, which is to get back to the Super Bowl this year in Las Vegas. Eagles are going to be fine. Ron Rivera is not.
Yeah, Paul in the YouTube chat says, careful, Cadillac. AJ will keep your receipts and get back at you for calling him a beta. Look, AJ Brown is an alpha as a player. Will. He's got an alpha mentality, but that's a beta move only because it's just so unnecessary, especially in that moment. A.J. Brown is the type that if he's up 49-0 and you've been talking trash to him the whole game and he scores on you again, sure, flip the ball to him and get the 15-yard penalty. If you want to prove your point, you cannot do it in that setting, under 2 minutes left, no timeouts, and give them that opportunity. Hutton, we can talk more about this on the other side, but also I want to get into our last beta of the week, which is the Patriots, Mac Jones, and the big question, is Bill Belichick in trouble? Because I think the answer is yes. We'll get into that when we come back. This is Hot Mike with Hutton and Withrow across the OutKick Network.
What you're experiencing is the bold taste of a Southern legend. Old Smoky Moonshine and Whiskey, authentic Tennessee mountain-style spirits. We believe in crafting flavors that were born from tradition but defy expectation, and pioneering a new experience with every sip. Because if it doesn't do this, it'll eat this. Old Smoky Moonshine and Whiskey.
Welcome into OutKick the show. I am Clay Travis, your fearless leader. I am going to continue to argue that sports is one of the great unifying forces in all of American life. ESPN is a sinking ship. Democrats are now the party of the white, woke college graduate.
We live in a land of participation trophies.
You gotta lean into the turns. You really gotta lean into the turns.
When Leah Thomas walked in that first day, it got silent, and every girl was uncomfortable.
Very difficult to go back-to-back years in the NFL with the number 1 overall pick.
Is it fair for people to be upset with Barbie?
I've been out of LA long enough to have forgotten that libs, no matter how ridiculous the scenario, are gonna live. Another week of inflation, another week with Biden with COVID, and another set of losers to crown. People don't watch the WNBA on TV, in person, on a plane, on a train, on a bus, or on purpose. I mean, what have you seen firsthand of how this has affected you in the plant and your fellow employees? Under Joe Biden, the Taliban has retaken Afghanistan. Putin has invaded Ukraine. So if there was ever a time for freaking aliens to inhabit and conquer Earth, now would be that time.
We've seen coaches throw water bottles. We've seen coaches act like idiots. We've seen coaches slap other coaches. But I think if you're involved in carjacking, you're inherently a rotten human. The level of stupid that sometimes gets on our YouTube chat just gives me a headache. You're born a male, play with males. You're born a female, play with females. Don't at me about it. The American people are being cheated. We, ladies and gentlemen, are being cheated.
There's no doubt in my mind he could have caught the ball in his back pocket if he'd been running. Blowing a lead and losing a game is 100 times more lasting and painful in some clubhouses than losing the game 15-0. If I had to start a list in the last 10 years of horrible underachievers, he's at the top.
We were directly impacted by the whole Leah Thomas thing. And we were able to see you guys on the ground with your signs supporting. That was huge.
They were saying, oh, it's only one or two. That's rubbish. And we all know that's rubbish. Once those trans-identifying males were able to succeed, it just encouraged others.
Old Smoky Moonshine and Whiskey. Bold taste of the Southern Legend.
Back. Hot Mic with Hutton and Withrow across the OutKick network. I'm Chad Withrow. Jonathan Hutton, he's alongside for this segment. He'll be back in studio with us in a couple of days. Big weekend in the NFL with some crazy outcomes. One outcome that was included this past weekend was the worst loss ever for Bill Belichick. And this comes at a time where his Patriots look terrible. I don't know how else to call it. They have no identity. They have no quarterback, and their quarterback's also not well liked around the league and seen as kind of a punk in Mac Jones. Hutton, we thought that Bill O'Brien coming back could be the saving grace for this offense and Mac Jones. That hasn't been the case. He's gotten worse. They're getting blown out by the Cowboys, not even competitive in this game. And it begs the question, are we seeing the end of Bill Belichick in New England?
Yeah, and I get the sense we were doing that prior to the offseason even starting, quite frankly. You know, we had Tom Curran on, a great Patriots reporter. Mike Reese at ESPN has also echoed this, that there is a bit of a hot seat feel to Belichick and the Patriots, and that was before the season kicked off. And I think I read into that, just going back to the offensive coordinator situation a year ago, where McDaniels ends up in Las Vegas, and they bring in guys who are former Patriots coaches who know Bill Belichick and the Patriot way, but don't know offensive play calling. And they paired him in year number 2, Mac Jones, that is, with those guys. A year later, Belichick's guys are out, and here comes Bill O'Brien back into the mix. And you can just feel there's just not the comfortable tenor that the organization normally has. They lack a lot of speed. They need a lot of it, either through the draft or through free agency. They had the option, not necessarily speed options. They had the option of going after and ponying up to level up with what the Titans offered DeAndre Hopkins. They chose not to. They did not go all in with Dalvin Cook after visiting with him and having that out there. So they if they're a run-first team, they're not very good at that. They are defensive-minded. But there are two teams that carry that mentality. It's the Titans and the Patriots are getting boat raced. And Mac Jones is in year 3 of a 4-year contract. And this coming off season, they will have to determine if they're picking up their 5th-year option, which right now they're not going to do, which is a guaranteed $25 million in year 5.
So he's 18 games away, Belichick is, from passing Don Shula for most wins in NFL history. We got a lot of time to talk about legacy and him versus Brady and all that, but I will be very curious to see if someone hires him, if he wants to keep coaching.
Oh, yeah.
And he has a chance to get there in a 2-3 year stretch with another team. I don't think it's going to be for long, but if another team hires him immediately and he gets right back to winning with that team just to reach that record, that would be an interesting Vegas odds to see right now if you could take what it would be to take Bill Belichick breaking the all-time wins record.
He is, Chad. He is a diehard history buff when it comes to the NFL. He absolutely wants that. It doesn't necessarily have to be with New England. and I don't think it will be. Now, consider some of the what could happen, just hypotheticals. If Dallas goes on a losing streak and they somehow crater, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mike McCarthy Jerry Jones isn't getting younger. We say that every other week, it feels like. I do. But
I say
look
that every
around
week about myself, too, much less Jerry
same,
Jones.
yeah,
So,
same,
I'm not getting any younger either.
Jerry Jones wants another Super Bowl, and he doesn't want he doesn't want anyone to reference the 90s. We're talking about the Cowboys' best seasons, right? That's number one. Again, I'm just throwing out owners that would absolutely go hire that dude. Vegas is another one. Let's mention what has happened there and the expectations around that organization. And of course, there are others that come to mind that will be surprises. And Belichick would be at the top of the list because, again, short-term solution, he would choose the part where he would go in and win. And again, those guys are about winning, Belichick and Brady. And Belichick without Brady, he's not winning. So, and he's not going to win with Mac Jones either.
Well, that officially concludes our betas of the week
Yep.
because the next guy is definitely not a beta. Christian McCaffrey has been incredible and
Awesome.
was again yesterday. Speaking of records, 13 straight games of the touchdown breaks Jerry Rice's franchise record with the 49ers for consecutive games of the touchdown. He was masterful once again yesterday, Hutton, and it is so much fun to watch the different ways that Kyle Shanahan designs plays to get him the football. And you don't even have to get that creative with him. You can just hand him the ball, and he can make things happen. But he's such a useful weapon, and you can utilize him in so many different ways. We saw that again yesterday with his big game against the Cardinals.
Well, and the 13 straight is tied for the franchise with Jerry Rice. So he's got the Niners record there, tied with the all-time great at the receiver spot. He had a ton of yards all-purpose. He's on pace for like 25 or 2,600 all-purpose yards, and he's been excellent. Everyone kind of laughed at the trade that they made with Carolina for the position. He's the highest-paid running back in the NFL, but he's used more than that. And that he is their identity. It goes through him. His identity in Carolina was soft tissue injuries, banged up knees, shoulder. Can he stay healthy enough and continue what he's been doing, which is just straight domination? If he does, he can win MVP, because around the league right now, there is a lot of up and down play at the quarterback position. They're strong play, but the contenders that we would normally point to, Mahomes doesn't have the same amount of weapons. And of course, Hurts was in the mix last year. You've got Tua in Miami that's going back and forth. All of a sudden, Josh Allen's not turning the football over. McCaffrey is at the forefront of the best players through the first month of the season, and he's on a pace where he's going to be the focal point, the identity, and the storyline of right now the best team in the NFL, San Francisco.
Hutton, you're down there in Tampa. What is the buzz around Baker Mayfield and what he's been able to do? And it's certainly been a resurgence for Baker Mayfield in his 3-1 start with Tampa. The question now is, has Tampa Bay and the Bucs unlocked something within Baker Mayfield that this is sustainable now for him in his career and what they're able to accomplish?
Sustainable in the short term, yes. Look, there's not much buzz about him here. There's more buzz about the receiving core and the fact that they have 3 wins, which is a surprise. I think there's still a lot to prove from that area. There's a lot of doubt as well. Like, okay, it's great now. What's going to happen? But this is also a Buccaneers fan base that's extremely passionate and loyal. And at a sports bar yesterday, you better believe the road game was on and people were going crazy when Tampa Bay won. So, yeah, they're in the division that's very winnable. This is a great spot for Baker, now in his 4th team in the last 12 months, which is crazy. And when you consider the turbulence that was Carolina after the way things ended in the locker room in Cleveland, I think the resurgence for Baker Mayfield is more about the leader behind the scenes and on the field than it is performances, because he's put up nice performances before. And, can he also tone down the physical nature that he wants to do? He was in the preseason, he's dipping his shoulder and going after a defensive back again. That's how he got hurt in Cleveland.
Yeah.
On his way out. If he can stop doing that, putting himself at risk, he will be on a longer-term 3-year type contract a year from now. Could be here, could be elsewhere depending on where their record is.
Hutton, not as good a news quarterback-wise as what Baker Mayfield's been able to do with Joe Burrow so far this year with Cincinnati. Joe Burrow is 28% on throws of 10 or more yards down the field. He's hurt. I think it's very obvious. He does not trust his calf muscle and the injury there. Does not trust his offensive line. Does not trust what he's seeing down the field. You got Jamar Chase now saying, I'm always bleeping open when asked whether or not he's open on these plays. There could be some division with this team that has experienced a lot of success in recent seasons with Joe Burrow. And I'm not so sure they shouldn't just put him on the shelf at this point from what we're seeing. They lose 27-3 to the Titans yesterday, and that is now 2 3-point performances production-wise on the season through 4 games. Cincinnati's 1-3 on the season. What should they do with Joe Burrow right now?
I think they're about to shut him down. He has looking at here, they're dead last in the NFL in yards per play, passing yards per attempt. And that just means they're punting and they're putting more pressure on the defense that is normally pinning their ears back and getting after the quarterback because they're playing off of great play and they have a lead on the scoreboard. Burrow had one completion yesterday of his 20 that went for more than 10 yards of his 20 attempts, 20 completions, I should say. He had just 4 of his total attempts in the game in Nashville that went beyond in the air 10 yards. So he's not pushing the ball, and they're trying to get the ball out fast, and that's because he's not mobile. He can't move enough. He's getting banged up and knocked around. And if you collapse the pocket from the interior, Burrow's done because the improv and his ability to spin and move and get outside the pocket or just tilt a certain way off balance to where he can throw the pass, that's not there this year. And I say they're about to shut him down because another loss, and there's no reason to continue to go down this path. They don't have a great backup option because they're saying this version of Joe Burrow is better. It's also Joe Burrow wanting to play. He's the highest paid player in the NFL. And I think Jamar Chase is going to end up more pissed off about his preseason comments where he said, hey, if Joe's not ready to go, he shouldn't start week 1 or week 2. Make sure he's ready. And that dude would know because he had a calf issue and he took his time last year and he missed the first week and they went on and had a great season in the regular season. So, yeah, I think there's more division in that decision than there is division between quarterback and wide receiver.
Yeah, he looked like Zach Wilson at one point where he went down a couple times with very limited contact because he's hurt and couldn't stand on his leg properly.
Commend him.
Yeah.
I commend him for giving it a go, but, I mean, it's not a sustainable proposition for him because the team overall is him. And if you just have an average to below average quarterback, your record's going to be 1-3 most likely, at best 2-2. And you're 2-2 because you play teams that don't have their superstar at full strength like Burrow was yesterday.
Major League Baseball playoffs start tomorrow with the wild card series, and we'll get going with that. Twins and Blue Jays in the American League. Rays versus Rangers as well in the American League. Brewers and Diamondbacks in the National League. And an NL East battle on one side of it. Phillies, Marlins, and the winner will play the Braves in the division round.
Who you want?
I do not want the Phillies. I will tell you that. I'd much prefer the Marlins. That's for sure.
I do prefer the one-game playoff, though. What we have here. I do like the intrigue and the buzz that it is presented for the final week of what was a fun finish to the regular season, and now the playoffs that ramp up. And there's been some really good baseball this year.
Yeah,
some great storylines. And some overlooked and maybe underrated storylines too, like the Atlanta Braves roster on offense. I think the postseason will be more about their pitching staff.
Yeah, best of 3, and then that goes on to the division series after that. But good baseball to watch this week nonetheless. Sad news also, Tim Wakefield, knuckleballer, a great guy by all accounts, passes away from brain cancer. I was texting with R.A. Dickey, another famous knuckleballer, earlier today. He cannot join the show because he's out of town, but said that he's extremely saddened by this and that Tim Wakefield was one of the best mentors he could ever ask to have when he was trying to make that move to the knuckleball. So terrible news there. And Hutton, a guy that we all knew as kids growing up, when you're in the backyard trying to throw a knuckleball, it was Tim Wakefield. That was the inspiration for trying to throw that knuckleball.
Yeah. Yeah, it was the growing up in the 90s, he was He was on the backyard wiffle ball all-star teams that people would create on their rosters, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then if he were inserted in the lineup, you had to go as the knuckleball, and people would bash, go yard in wiffle ball. But on the mound, he was incredible. And I feel for his family and everything they've gone through. Yeah, with how everything it ended for Wakefield. It's very sad. All
very, very sad. So yes, definitely prayers for his family and friends, everyone who knew Tim Wakefield. There was an everyman quality about him. Those guys who can throw the knuckleball. Looks like we average Joes could do it in the major leagues also. Hutton is no average Joe. He stepped in today, helped us out for a couple segments. Hutton, great talking to you. Best of luck tonight at the Logan Ryan charity event.
Thank you so much, Chad. And I'm going to stand up so you can see the background that I tried to set up for you.
Nice.
But you can see the skyline of Tampa right behind me here.
Now I see it.
And we have a great event here in Florida, so it's going to be a lot of fun. Thanks for holding it down, and I'll be back soon.
It's beautiful. Taylor Swift talk, maybe, next.
Good morning. The NFL has filed a grievance against the NFL Players Association over running backs being possibly coerced/coached into feigning injuries. That's right. Faking injuries is what the NFLPA suggested in memos to running backs whining about not getting guaranteed money. Well, let me tell you something. I don't blame the NFL. There are provisions in the collectively bargained agreement that say NFL players in general must give their best effort. Well, if you're telling NFL running backs to fake injuries, and have we seen NFL running backs fake injuries? I don't blame the NFL for getting a little crabby. Let's talk about it. Jonathan Taylor of my beloved Colts, he's out, had ankle surgery way back in November, still can't go. His agent said, however, that he could pass a physical right now. My thought is, if Jonathan Taylor could, quote, pass a physical right now, why is he on the PUP? The agent said this a week or two ago. If he knew he could pass a physical, maybe you sit out a game or two. You don't go on a 4-game PUP. But here you see Tom Pelissero saying what a lot of us that were a little bit crabby of. Filed a grievance over allegations the union advised running backs to consider feigning or exaggerating injuries to gain leverage in contract talks, and seeking an order for the union to cease and desist from such improper conduct. I think Jonathan Taylor is absolutely faking. Look, I don't know. What do I know? I know this, though. Jonathan Taylor walked around pretty good at training camp. Jonathan Taylor's been whining about this. Jonathan Taylor and his agent, as I said, have already said, yeah, he could pass a physical. Let me tell you about Austin Eckler, an ankle injury with no timetable for return. Really? I coached for 30 years. A lot of guys with ankle injuries, high ankle injuries, tweaked ankles, you name it, and everything in between. And there was always a timetable for them to return. But all of a sudden, Austin Eckler, who is the most vocal of the running backs, I can't return. I got an ankle. See, ankles are tough because there is swelling, there is black and blue. You do know, but also when you get healed from an ankle and you take a bad step, a lot of times on a heel, it can hurt and there's no outward sign. It's like mental health. You can say, I got mental health. It's like verbal abuse. You can say a guy verbally abused me. You can say anything you want. So Austin Eckler, Jonathan Taylor, certainly there are questions. I did not see the Saquon Barkley injury live. I saw it many, many times on replay. I guess he's hurt. We'll see how long Saquon Barkley stays out. There are some legitimate guys that are hurt. I think we all agree Nick Chubb certainly hurt. I think J.K. Dobbins hurt. Aaron Jones seems to be hurt. Chase Edmonds seems to be hurt. But you see what I'm doing here between Eckler and Barkley and Chubb and Taylor and Edmonds and Dobbins and Jones? You got a lot of running backs hurt. Why would I, if this was in fact run like a business, give guaranteed money to NFL running backs? They just get hurt. And truthfully, the Colts just won a road football game with a running back. Zach Moss looked all right. Got into a hole. Okay, fine. There's not a chance in holy hell that I am giving money to an NFL running back that is guaranteed for anything longer than a year. I'll give you a year's guarantee. I'll give you a 3-year deal, 1-year guarantee.
We're back. Hot Mic with Hutton and Withrow across the OutKick network. I'm Chad Withrow. Thanks to Jonathan Hutton for hopping on from Tampa. He's there emceeing a charity event for Logan Ryan. He'll be back with us on Wednesday. Huge weekend across college football and the NFL. We've been recapping that throughout the day. Bobby Carpenter may be joining us now, maybe joining us a little bit later. We just saw him hop on the Zoom, so he may be hopping on with us a little bit early on the show. We've got Tim Brando coming up later on the show as well. We'll talk a lot of college football today. And then in the final hour of the show, Mark Harris of OutKick. We'll talk about the Ryder Cup. I love the European Ryder Cup for this reason. When the Ryder Cup interferes with football season on the weekend on Saturday and Sunday, and it's square up against it, that's not an advantageous television spot for the Ryder Cup to be in. But when it's played in Europe and you can watch, starting at 6 a.m., and I'm an early riser every day, even on the weekend, and I can watch 3-4 hours of Ryder Cup coverage before watching football, that's a beautiful thing. So I had a chance to watch a lot of Ryder Cup over the weekend from Rome. Unfortunately for the Americans, not a great showing. I know Zach Johnson, their captain, said they were battling illness throughout the weekend. They got off to a terrible start. They got a little bit better. At one point, I think it was 10.5 to 5.5. And then singles came around, and the Europeans ended up taking care of business and winning the Ryder Cup, avenging the loss from 2 years prior at Whistling Straits, where the Americans mopped up the Europeans. And the Americans still have not won on European soil since 1993. So the Europeans take care of business in that one. We're going to be joined by Bobby Carpenter, I think, here coming up momentarily. But I want to get into Taylor Swift just for a second. And no, I don't want to spend an exorbitant amount of time on Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce, because quite frankly, it's lost its luster. It was a great 2-week run, America. It really was. Networks, you had your fun showing Taylor Swift all the time. She went to 2 straight games, 1 home for the Chiefs, 1 away. I found it interesting that she wore the Chiefs gear at Arrowhead Stadium, but she went neutral in New York, where she lives in New York, when she was at the Jets game. But I thought last night was a law of diminishing returns on the Taylor Swift love and showing her at all times. It was not the same effect as the week prior in Kansas City. And we saw every angle. You're seeing a number of them right now. Oh, by the way, the guy to the left of Taylor Swift is one Ryan Reynolds. You may know him as Deadpool. NBC apparently didn't even know who Ryan Reynolds was when they're showing Taylor Swift walk in. And you've got Deadpool and Wolverine flanking her left and right, walking in with her last night. Didn't matter, because it was all about Taylor Swift and all about the relationship with Travis Kelce. So it was fun while it lasted. It was a fun 2 weeks. But the Taylor Swift circus with the NFL and coverage with networks, it's going downhill, and we're not going to see as much of it anymore. Someone who's not going downhill is Bobby Carpenter. He's on with us right now. Bobby's on to talk some college football, does a great job talking that sport with us every week. We can talk about anything else. We could probably talk about Taylor Swift if we asked him to, but we're not going to ask him about that. Bobby, big weekend of college football we all just witnessed. Appreciate you hopping on with us.
Hey, my pleasure, Withrow. Obviously, man, you get to take a look at Taylor Swift out there with Travis Kelce. I mean, who doesn't want more of that? I know that's something that you're tuning into these NFL games to watch.
Oh, yeah, those diehard NFL fans, they're basically just one big Swiftie. That's what they want more than anything else is Taylor Swift coverage. Hey, how about Michigan this week? Really impressed. We've seen how hard it is to win on the road, even when the opponent's not great. But I thought Michigan handled business on the road at Nebraska, unlike we've really seen a team go on the road and do so far this year. Impressed with Jim Harbaugh's squad. What'd you make of that? And on the flip side, boy, Nebraska has no offense.
Yeah, most of the Big Ten West has limited offense, if any at all. And Jim Harbaugh did a heck of a job. Came back. Obviously, they navigated the waters without him. And that offense is humming. They do it a little bit differently. I mean, they're not the team that throws it 45 times a game. They like to have their big plays through running the football, so that makes a lot of sense. And defensively, they've been pretty impressive. I know Nebraska doesn't have a whole lot of offense to write home about, but Michigan still went out there, got stops. They got Blake Corum going. and they got a plethora of running backs to be able to touch the ball. But this season's going to come down to J.J. McCarthy and how well he plays. A couple of weeks ago, he had, 2 or 3 interceptions, I believe. When he has a clean sheet, they're pretty darn good and pretty tough to beat because not only can he do it with his arm, he also can do it with his legs, which we saw with some of his scrambles on Saturday.
Yeah, and the flip side of that with the road game was Georgia's performance at Auburn. Auburn had a great chance, up 10-0 at one point. Great chance to pull off the upset and knock off the 2-time defending national champion, but Brock Bowers got in the way. And what more can we say about him, Bobby? He is a true weapon, maybe the best pure player in college football. He gets the big touchdown late for the Bulldogs. But Georgia has looked very susceptible in the early part of this season, and really top to bottom in the SEC, you can poke holes in all the top teams in that conference this year.
Yeah, I loved LSU coming into this season, and they've struggled mightily. They haven't been great. Obviously, huge comeback, couldn't ultimately get it done. You start talking about Georgia, they're a flawed team. I think part of it is this year, Withrow, is the fact that I don't know if there's a team that you would say is even close to flawless. And maybe there is. Maybe that's Oregon out west. Maybe that's Washington if they weren't on the Pac-12 network and people could actually watch and consume some of their product. You look at USC, and they've got a great offense, but limited defense like they've always had. Georgia's still working through the fact they have a young quarterback. And when you have so many guys leave for the NFL year after year, I don't care how well you recruit, attrition will eventually come to get you. And I think we're seeing that a little bit now at Georgia. And that's not to say that they're not going to be a really good team, but they're going to have to continue to improve and get better. And the good news for, Bulldogs fans is the fact that you're improving and you're still winning. And so they can kind of ease through this schedule. I'll tell you this, the Kentucky Wildcats look pretty darn good with Mark Stoops after what they've done to Florida. And I went back and looked at this, Withrow. When the last time Florida was beaten 3 years in a row by Kentucky?
I only know this because I talked about it last week. It was the late 40s, I think, right? 48-51.
Yep, that was it. It was the 4-year stretch right there. And now you look at Mark Stoops, I think he's won 4 of 6, and he's won 3 in a row. It is remarkable with what he's been able to do. And I would tell any team that's looking for a coach right now, and maybe he loves it there in Kentucky, but let's be honest. You're always going to be second fiddle to basketball, no matter how much he kicks and screams and how good they are, because they're very good. But, I would back up the Brinks truck to whatever it takes, because he's been in a very tough conference, played a tough schedule, and then they fade sometimes at the end of the year, but he's not playing on a level playing field with all these other teams with the amount of resources and everything that many of the schools in the SEC have.
Well, and you mentioned Brinks truck, so we'll segue right into this. Michigan State, are they going to back the Brinks truck up again the way they did for Mel Tucker, or do they feel like they made a mistake there and they learned from it and they're going to be a little bit more conservative in what they're going to pay their next coach? What are you hearing in regards to that job, Bobby? How good of a job is it, and who do you think they should target?
Well, I think it can be a good job, and they have people that are willing to pour resources into it. And when you have a couple of alumni who own NBA franchises that are willing to invest in your football program, well, yeah, that's going to help immensely. They went after Mel Tucker. They paid him a ton off of some preliminary success. Maybe looking back on it now, eliminate the maybe. It was a little premature. And I think that's why they were searching so hard to find a way to try to get out of that contract with Mel, because they'd rather divert those resources to their next coach. And, it's funny that you bring that up after we're talking about Mark Stoops. Like, if I'm them, I go after him. I go after him in a big way. He's from Youngstown, Ohio. Maybe he wants that job. Maybe he doesn't. I don't know definitively that Michigan State is a better job, but I know with the Big Ten, being shuttering divisions, I think it's a much better job now than it's possibly been in previous years.
That's going to be interesting to see Kentucky the rest of the way, because the schedule is going to get harder, obviously, starting this week with Georgia, but a really good start for Mark Stoops. I thought a really important bounce back for Notre Dame, Bobby, in this one. They give up the late score again, but they're able to get the ball back, go down and score, and beat Duke, who's been a great story the early part of this year. What did you make of that win for Notre Dame after that emotional loss to Ohio State at home the week before?
Well, it's huge for Notre Dame because they're playing in primetime every night. They're playing late games. And when they're on the road, you got to travel back. You lose an emotional one at home. And that's incredibly difficult. Anybody that will say that it's not a big deal to play those late night games and then lose when everything has been built into it and you put your whole season around it, like that's tough. And so it was important that they bounced back. They were able to do that. And believe me, it was almost like the Uno reverse card was hit on them against Ohio State. They controlled much of the game. All of a sudden, Duke takes control late, and then you have to have that miraculous drive in the 4th and 16 scramble by Sam Hartman to put them in position to be able to score. Oh, and then, by the way, you're on the road at Louisville this week at night, and then you have USC coming to town in 2 weeks, also a night game. So a lot of travel, a lot of evening games. And the reason that's tough, it jacks up your sleep schedule for players. You feel like you're behind. And as coaches, guys, after games on Saturday, they don't go home and just smash beers and hang out and watch college football. They usually go and they'll have recruiting obligations, and then they go and start breaking down film for the next week. And so it's important for them to be able to do that when you always play night games. That is significantly harder. And so Notre Dame with Marcus Freeman, you saw what happened last year with Marshall. It was important that didn't happen again. It stinks to see Riley Leonard obviously go down the way he did, because I think Duke could have potentially been a 10-win team this year. Without him, though, it's going to be really tough to probably get to that mark.
Life is so much better for guys on our side of it now, Bobby, because we can just smash beers while watching the games. Don't have to wait till post-game to smash beers. Even when those guys can't, we'll smash the beers for them. Bobby Carpenter talking college football with us here on Hot Mic. I am amazed by Iowa's commitment to boring football, Bobby. I got to ask you about this, because it is remarkable that they're not even trying. They're saying, this is who we are. We're not going to change who we are. We don't care if we're running 30-something plays a game. We are just going to play boring football. I love the preseason stipulation of scoring 25 points per game or more for Brian Ferentz to keep his job. It's just incredible to me when you see all this innovation across the sport and teams trying to do anything to be exciting and have a dynamic offense. Here you have the Iowa Hawkeyes sticking to their convictions and deciding, nope, that's not for us. We're going to play a 1986 style, and we're just going to do the best we can with it.
See, I don't have a problem with the style of football as long as it's effective and efficient. The problem is that style for them is no longer effective and efficient. They don't have an offensive line that can go out and overwhelm you. They don't have running backs that can make guys miss and have explosive gains. They do have some decent tight ends. The problem is Luke Lachey, very talented fourth-year player for him. He breaks or dislocates his ankle, so he's done. And so that was basically the extent of their passing game. By the way, Cade McNamara looks like he's out for the season now. So if you thought it was bad before, wait till you see this thing now, because that was their emphasis of bringing in Cade McNamara to be able to push the ball down the field. And now those days are done. And I honestly don't think Kirk Ferentz knows another way. I mean, this is what he does, and it has been efficient. It was before. It's no longer currently. I don't think that's what they're doing. It's simply due to the fact that they don't have any playmakers anywhere else. You could run that style and still be good. It's just you have to have guys and you have to be able to make plays. And the reason they do it is they try to keep their defensive exposure to a minimum, because that's what carries their team, and they don't want those guys to get worn down. And so I understand why they're doing it, but they need to try to find a way, like you said, to create some more big plays, because it is impossible to win the way that they are with the playmakers they have.
I wonder if Brian Ferentz is walking into the meeting room today saying, hey, Dad, can we go down to 20 a game now that we lost our starting quarterback? I think that's fair. That's reasonable. 25, too much. Let's go down to 20 a game. Hey, in the Pac-12, they're not worried about scoring just 20 a game. They're scoring more than that, especially USC offensively. But the big question lies with the defense of the Trojans, Bobby, and it reared its ugly head again on Saturday against Colorado. Are you a believer in USC's national championship hopes, even though their defense looks suspect once again?
I'm not, because you've got to be able to get a stop eventually. And their stop was an onside kick that they recovered at the end of the game, or else Colorado, if they get the ball back, I mean, I think people are full intent on them going down and scoring. And make no mistake about it, I think at that point, Deion Sanders is going for two. Like, he's not laying up, dude. He's ball me. Let's go. We're going at the green, and that's how we're going to play this thing. So, this is the same USC team that they've been. Like, this is why they've struggled to beat Utah, because Utah looks like Iowa wants to. they can be explosive. They can have some big plays, but what they'll really do is they'll just grind into you and lean on you and play really good stinking defense and be physical, and they'll wear you down. They'll control the clock, and eventually they'll get a couple stops, and then you're going to be chasing, and they're going to be dictating tempo. So that's why you look at Utah's won the last 2 Pac-12 championships. Now, I understand they just lost, in a tough one on Friday night, but that's still been without Cam Rising. So if they get them back, I think they give USC problems. I think Oregon looks like much more of a complete team than USC. I mean, you saw what they did in a comparable game to Colorado. Now, granted, it was at Oregon. It wasn't at home for Colorado. So you take that with a grain of salt. And I think Washington, if you want to get into a pure track meet and try to race you to 70, I think Washington is just as equipped to be able to do that. So then it comes down to, do you make a mistake? Is there a penalty? Is there something that goes wrong? Who throws an interception? It's just not a game that I would like to be a part of or like to watch as a fan, because there's no margin for error on the offense.
Bobby, you're right. Deion definitely would have gone Roy McAvoy from Tin Cup and Kevin Costner and gone for the green in the hole and that opportunity to go for 2. Hey, appreciate you, Bobby. Love having you on the show on Mondays to recap the college football weekend. Have a great week. We'll talk to you again next week.
Yes, sir. You enjoy it, man. And give my best to Hutton when he gets back.
Will do. Hutton's having a better time than us right now down on the beach in Tampa, getting ready for that Logan Ryan event. We're getting ready for Timmy B, our guy, Tim Brando, Fox Sports. He's going to join us next to give us another side of this Colorado story that maybe most of media is missing out on. That's next. This is Hot Mike with Hutton and Withrow.
What you're experiencing is the bold taste of a Southern legend. Old Smoky Moonshine and Whiskey, authentic Tennessee mountain-style spirits. We believe in crafting flavors that were born from tradition but defy expectation, and pioneering a new experience with every sip. Because if it doesn't do this, it ain't this. Old Smoky Moonshine and Whiskey.
Welcome into OutKick the show. I am Clay Travis, your fearless leader. I am going to continue to argue that sports is one of the great unifying forces in all of American life. ESPN is a sinking ship. Democrats are now the party of the white, woke college graduate.
We live in a land of participation trophies.
You gotta lean into the turns. You really gotta lean into the turns.
When Leah Thomas walked in that first day, it got silent, and every girl was uncomfortable.
Very difficult to go back-to-back years in the NFL with the number 1 overall pick.
Is it fair for people to be upset with Barbie?
I've been out of LA long enough to have forgotten that libs, no matter how ridiculous the scenario, are gonna live. Another week of inflation, another week with Biden with COVID, and another set of losers to crown. People don't watch the WNBA on TV, in person, on a plane, on a train, on a bus, or on purpose. I mean, what have you seen firsthand of how this has affected you in the plant and your fellow employees? Under Joe Biden, the Taliban has retaken Afghanistan. Putin has invaded Ukraine. So if there was ever a time for freaking aliens to inhabit and conquer Earth, now would be that time.
We've seen coaches throw water bottles. We've seen coaches act like idiots. We've seen coaches slap other coaches. But I think if you're involved in carjacking, you're inherently a rotten human. The level of stupid that sometimes gets on our YouTube chat just gives me a headache. You're born a male, play with males. You're born a female, play with females. Don't at me about it. The American people are being cheated. We, ladies and gentlemen, are being cheated.
There's no doubt in my mind he could have caught the ball in his back pocket if he'd been running. Blowing a lead and losing a game is 100 times more lasting and painful in some clubhouses than losing the game 15-0. If I had to start a list in the last 10 years of horrible underachievers, he's at the top.
We were directly impacted by the whole Leah Thomas thing, and we were able to see you guys on the ground with your signs supporting. that was huge.
They were saying, oh, it's only 1 or 2. That's rubbish, and we all know that's rubbish. Once those trans-identifying males were able to succeed, it just encouraged others.
Old Smoky Moonshine and Whiskey. Bold taste of the Southern Legend.
Withrow across the OutKick network. I'm Chad Withrow. Hutton will be back with us on Wednesday. Right now, we've got our guy, Timmy B, Tim Brando, the great broadcaster with Fox Sports, on with us right now. I like that pause right there between great. Could have said a lot of different things with Tim Brando's greatness, but he's on with us right now. He is a great broadcaster. And Timmy B is the envy of all of sports right now because he gets to call games out west, which is now the epicenter of college football, even though the Pac-12 is dissolving. And you get good game after good game out there, Tim. And you got to see 2 more good teams this past week with the Oregon State's win over Utah.
Yeah, you know, I think if we had a Pac-12 game on Fox this weekend, we don't. But if we did, that's where they'd send Spencer and me. Because I just found out about our schedule for Saturday week, and we're going to be going back out to Corvallis, Oregon, for Oregon State and UCLA on the 14th. So I'm thrilled that we're doing these games. And by the way, it's not the first league that I helped put to bed. I did the USFL in it's final year the first time around. So show me a league that's going out of business. I'll show you Tim Brando is there to help bury it. But it's really great to be covering games out there because, as you know, the league is right now the best in America. I'm not even getting pushback from SEC fans about the level of balance, the level of great quarterbacks. And now you're seeing even the line play. You can say, well, the line of scrimmage is still maybe questionable. I don't think that's necessarily true. Oregon State and Utah are 2 of the toughest teams that you could possibly have at the line of scrimmage. And they played a game that was not necessarily aesthetically pleasing, but we certainly had a big audience for it last Friday night. And I was thrilled to get to do that game. It was number 10 against number 19. And Utah was knocked from the ranks of the unbeaten. And I think Oregon State sent a message that they're here to stay. So it's just a fun league. I think when you look at UCLA with 1 loss and you look at Utah with 1 loss, they're not out of it. And all these other teams that are undefeated are certainly very much in the mix. And, yeah, they'll probably cannibalize each other towards the end. I agree with that assessment. Might be tough for them to get a team in the CFP as a result, but they certainly have a fighting chance with this many good games and this many good teams.
And Utah doing this without their starting quarterback, Cam Rising, very impressive. Speaking of quarterback play in the Pac-12 and how good it's been, we saw 2 of them go head-to-head this past weekend with Caleb Williams at USC, Shedeur Sanders at Colorado. Great comeback attempt by the Buffaloes in that game. And I know, Tim, there's been a lot made about Deion Sanders in Colorado and what they've become from a national media perspective. I know you believe, though, that maybe some are missing the point about Deion's true impact on the sport.
Oh, yeah, they definitely are. I want to thank, while I'm with you now, Chad, I want to thank Joe Morgan for the column that he talked to me about last week, and I think it was put out on Friday at foxnews.com. It was very fair, and I think hit on all the major points that I will hit on again here with you. And that is those that want to make this and have been appealing to the lowest common denominator in media and just making it about race are completely missing the point. 75% of the players that are in college football are black. The fact that there are black coaches, black head coaches, that was a battleground conversation with the Black Coaches Association years ago, which I'm happy to say Spencer Tillman and I were on the forefront of, and we're talking about it for years while we were at CBS. But Deion's doing this, and it's not, to say that Colorado is certainly Black America's team. I mean, that was on 4 or 5 different websites that you would figure it might be on, politically slanted. But then you saw, I think, a few sports websites go in that direction too, legitimate websites. And I think that's just, that's appealing to the lowest common denominator. To make it about race is to, in my opinion, gloss over this amazing, historic run that Deion has had. And regardless of the outcomes of the game, both at Oregon and the loss at home to USC, which we can get into a little bit later, the specifics of it, he's already won. I mean, he has. They are still the most talked about team in America. They're not ranked, and they don't deserve to be. They're not ranked in my poll that I just put out this morning either. But my goodness, the turnaround here is off the charts. And if they happen to get to 6 wins, I think they will get to 6. Let's face it, Travis Hunter's not there right now, and they'll get him back eventually. So I think that they could sneak in a few more wins in the Pac-12 at home. But what he's done in transforming the game has highlighted some of the issues that some of the other teams, blue bloods, okay, are having that no longer appear dominant. When we look out today at the college football top 25, you're not saying there's a top 4 or 5 and then a breaking point and we go to another tier. No, you're not. There are no dominant teams. And we're talking about as many as 15 to 16 teams right now that fan bases could be considering that we got as good a shot as anybody at the national championship. This is about the landscape flattening out, which I've been talking about for the last few years. We've been close to it, but we haven't been so close that it's affected the Alabamas, the Ohio States, okay, the Georgias, the blue bloods had been unaffected. Well, now they are, okay? Even Georgia, with their unbeaten record against that schedule, who wouldn't be? And even Auburn had a shot at beating them, and Auburn's not very good, second tier in the SEC at best. And were it not for their tight end, Bauer, they don't have a playmaker. Georgia doesn't deserve to be number 1. They don't deserve to be within 5 or 6 spots of number 1, in my opinion. What Colorado has done is kind of fueling the point of transfer portal and NIL for everybody to see. And that is, with the wealth of talent now being spread and coaches utilizing the portal, they are able to balance the playing field from what had been the fertile ground of the blue blood in recruiting 4 and 5 stars only, and then holding on to those players, and through that, having this much space between them and the next tier. That's all gone now. And Deion's done this in 1 year's time, and he flipped it completely, something other coaches had never done. And I think that the issues, and you can see it, and I pointed this out in Joe Morgan's article at foxnews.com, and I urge people to go and take a look at it if you haven't read it already. The bottom line is that a lot of veteran coaches that aren't going there right now, hint, Dabo Swinney at the top of that list, few others, right? Nick Saban's gone there, but maybe not enough, certainly not enough at quarterback this year. These guys have a level of jealousy and envy for what's going on with Deion, and they're not going to say it publicly, but you can see it. You can see it, and maybe you'll hear it when they're getting ready to play Colorado, okay? And it's getting to them. It's bothering them. When you see these coaches having quakes during post-game interviews, going nuts because of the pressure that's being put on them at places like Ohio State, Alabama, and other places, that's a byproduct of this new pressure that Deion's system and others like him is putting on the college game. And you can either embrace it and move forward, understanding you better play this game, or if you fight it, you will eventually lose and you'll be done because the boat has sailed and you're not going to be able to bring it back into the dock.
Well, and well said, Tim. And to your point, for those that want to play the race card on this and say, this is the new team for Black America, or however you want to phrase it.
Yeah.
I think it's really small-minded to pretend that white players wouldn't want to play for Deion also when they hear how he speaks, right? I'm thinking, I mean, when you hear the guy talk, and he's kind of new school and old school in his approach in a lot of ways and no nonsense about certain things, I'm thinking there are plenty of white players in America that are high school players or in the transfer portal that would love to go play for Deion. I think people are missing the boat on that one also.
No doubt about it.
Are we missing the boat? I don't know if we're missing the boat on it because people are talking about them, but you talked about all those blue blood teams, and the running joke every year is Texas back? And now they're in the mix this year where so many blue bloods look a little bit susceptible or a little more susceptible to going down this year. So I'll ask you, is Texas back? Is this a viable team that can win a national championship this year?
Well, I was certainly wrong about them in the preseason. I'll be the first to admit it. I admitted it to you and your partner the last time I was with you. Yeah, they would appear to be that, but am I willing to say they're all the way? No, I'm not. And the reason I'm not is because I need to see them against Oklahoma in the Red River rivalry. Okay, I need to know that they are, because as great as the Pac-12 is this year, okay, the Big 12 has actually been a disappointment. Okay, I thought Baylor would be better. I thought TCU would be better. Kansas State, I thought, would be better. They're not, and Texas Tech, I thought, was a diamond in the rough. And all of those teams have not measured up to my expectations yet this year. But the Pac-12 is every bit is dominant at the top, but yet at the bottom, I mean, there are no also-rans down there. Okay, even their poor teams are playing well. I mean, Cal almost beat Auburn, a team that took Georgia to the very limit. Okay, so the Pac-12 is good from the bottom all the way to the top. No, we're not sure of any of these teams right now, Chad. I mean, we're not. But based on who they've beaten, their level of performance in those victories, and the talent that I see on the field, I think they deserve to be number one. I think they deserve to be number one over Florida State, who arguably has better wins. Okay. Although the LSU win may not be quite as impactful after they're getting, 50 hung on them by Ole Miss and, 45 hung on them by Florida State. I think A&M, the end of last year, got 38. I mean, Brian Kelly's got to check his defense and see if he's got guys at DBU, they like to call LSU, that are willing to tackle anything. How about tackling somebody? But I mean, Texas right now, to me, I have them at the number one position because of their wins and how impressive they've appeared in those victories. Kansas hung with them for about 3 quarters the other day, but eventually they wore down. And Texas's level of talent took the game over, and they wound up, I think, covering the spread and winning convincingly in the fourth quarter. And I think Leipold is one of the best coaches in America, and I think Kansas is pretty good. They're going to win probably 7 or 8 games, at least 7, probably 8 games in the Big 12 this year. So I like what I see in Texas. The win at Alabama is important. It stimulated them, but I would tell the Texas people that are still cheering for that, remember Brian Kelly's 2-point conversion last year got LSU preseason ranked in the top 5, and look what's happened to them. Okay, maybe that was a bit of a mirage when LSU got that win. Alabama is not all that. They're not Alabama anymore. They're a one-dimensional team, and they won impressively their last time out against a team that's not very good, and I think that more than likely A&M is going to give them a hard time this week. I really believe that. I think A&M has raised its level a little bit of late, and we'll see what happens when those two get at it. But I certainly believe Alabama is going to lose at least one more time in the SEC.
Tim, got about a minute left here, but my wife is a miserable Nebraska fan right now, so I had a chance to watch some of Michigan's beat down in Nebraska and Lincoln over the weekend. Mm-hmm. Super impressed with this Michigan team and the balance they showed in that game. This has got to be a team that we're talking about nationally. Currently second in the country, so clearly getting their flowers, so to speak, right now. But what do you think about this Michigan squad?
Well, I had them winning it all in the preseason, and I still do. My preseason picks are based on what I prognosticate will happen for the season. And the helmet you see over my shoulder, or as Bino used to say, the helmet. When they bury me, I want to be in the Michigan helmet.
That's a good Bino Cook. That's good.
I love them. And I think Michigan, when they start playing the teams that they can really say are tough opponents, they'll be ready for them. I think to go in and take care of business in Lincoln the way they did was impressive. Matt Rule's in his first year. They're clearly not there yet, but their schedule is about as weak, if not weaker, than Georgia's. So they're a little bit of a paper two in the college football polls, whether it's the AP or the coaches poll. I dropped them to 5. I think they're worthy of being that high, but only that because of who they played. I got to see more from them before I can prop them back up. Once I get into the season, Chad, I'm going to rank teams based on their performance last week. You can move up in my poll or completely out based on one performance.
Yep.
USC, by example, I had way up there around 3 or 4 after I'd seen them early in the season. Then I saw them against Arizona State, a game Spencer and I had. I dropped them summarily. And last week, that defense looked like the same one that couldn't stop Utah on 2 occasions last year when they had Cam Rising.
Yeah, and that is the nature of college football, week to week, for sure. Hey, yep. Tim, thanks so much. We're running out of time this time. We really appreciate you. You're the man.
Happy to be with you, and I always am here for you.
Tim Brando, we'll be back, and we'll get back into some big headlines from the college football weekend. That's next.
I'm here at the Big Machine Music City Grand Prix, but that's not the only big race that's on people's minds. Let's go talk about it.
There's no way Biden can win again. There's just no way. Even the people that voted for him because they didn't like Trump, now at least have to see, like, senile, not all there. Probably won't be alive for 4 more years.
Are you a Trump guy? Or are you a DeSantis guy? Or someone else?
I don't like any of them.
Who's your dream candidate? Who would you want to run?
Myself. I think the best candidates probably are smart enough not to run.
I just hope there's somebody that's young enough to care about the country instead of their politics.
My fear is they get Gavin Newsom from California. And I think it would be the new cool vote for the younger people, and that's what I don't like.
Who do you think on the Republican side would be able to take on Gavin Newsom?
Great question. As a Republican registered, I love what Trump's body of work did, but they're just out to get him and destroy him, and we won't get things done, which is crappy for me to say. I thought DeSantis was going to be the guy. Trump only has 4 years left. He cannot fix everything that just happened in 4 years. And he's going to be battling indictments and all these false stuff for the next 4 years. We won't get anything done. And it'll just be the stalemate in America. That's why I almost don't want him in. But if he is the leading candidate, that's who I'm going to vote for.
Is there any Democrat that you would vote for, consider voting for?
Absolutely not.
What about RFK Jr.?
No.
Who should our first female president be?
Michelle Obama, of course.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to go with Harambe 2024.
We have the 2024 presidential race coming up, and I wanted to see who you thought your favorite TV characters would vote for. Homer Simpson, who do you think he would vote for?
Donald Trump, all the way.
Vito Corleone.
Whoa. Whoever advances the cause of the Corleone family. Yeah.
Tony Soprano. If Tony Soprano is voting in the 2024 election, who do you think he's voting for?
I'm gonna go Ron DeSantis.
Okay. Why do you think that?
Just seems like a Ron DeSantis kind of guy.
Is this a meatball joke that you're trying to make right now? What about Homer Simpson?
Homer would vote for Biden because he's a dope.
Who do you think Napoleon Dynamite would vote for?
That's a good question. I actually don't know.
There's a right answer here.
He's voting for himself or Pedro.
There's a Viking show, I think.
Okay.
Maybe that's Hulu. I don't know.
So in the Viking show, whatever the main character is, who do you think they would vote for in 2024?
Probably a goat or a dog.
I think we have one of those in office right now. So who do you think Jon Snow would vote for in this upcoming election?
I'm going to say Donald J. Trump.
Why do you think so?
Because Game of Thrones is all about drama, and Trump comes with the drama, baby.
Would you vote for Trump from jail?
Yeah, probably. Because at that point, what else do you have to lose?
Okay, would you vote for Trump from a jail cell?
Hell yeah, baby. I will get Trump out of jail.
Would you vote for Trump in jail?
Oh, yeah.
Based as
The thing that Trump needs to remember is there's another political figure that said, I don't recall very well.
Yeah.
And that's all he's got to say.
Is there like a dream candidate, someone that you think could like save us all?
Yeah, Jesus.
Amen to that.
Mike with Hutton and Withrow across the OutKick network. I am Chad Withrow. Fun show so far today. Looking back at a big weekend across football, NFL, college, plenty of big storylines. What a great week of sports ahead also. We enter October, which means we are right in the thick. We've got 5 weeks down of college football already, 4 weeks down of the NFL. We're getting to the heart of the season, conference play in college football, big matchups in the NFL, and Major League Baseball postseason starting this week with the Wild Card Series. Great week of sports all around, a time to be excited, time to be happy about everything going on, and we'll celebrate all those things sports-wise here on Hot Mic throughout the week, and plenty to get into, including what was, I think, maybe the biggest win for Lane Kiffin at Ole Miss so far over the weekend. What a shootout between LSU and Ole Miss. I'm watching some Tennessee, South Carolina Saturday night, flipping back and forth to this game. And every time I go back to it, it's another intense moment, a huge third or fourth down conversion, a team scoring a touchdown. Jaden Daniels looks good in this game. The LSU passing attack with Malik Neighbors looks awesome. And then it's Jackson Dart and Ole Miss coming right back and scoring. And when you look at Lane Kiffin and what he's accomplished at Ole Miss, he's done a very good job. But coming off of the week where Alabama looked wounded and looked susceptible to a loss at home, and Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss, after doing what Lane Kiffin always does, being smug, being a little bit sarcastic about who's calling defensive plays and whether or not this was Nick Saban's last year, they go down and get physically dominated by Alabama, much like pretty much every time Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin play Alabama. But to bounce back the next week and beat LSU and give them their second loss of the season, a preseason top 10 team, LSU, second loss of the season already, was really, really impressive for Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss. Davey Hudson in studio with us right now to also talk about this game. Davey, this was a fun one. Start to finish, the back and forth nature of it. I had a blast watching this game.
I mean, anytime 100 points get put up in a college football game, I'm going to be there to enjoy. And
Do you think Brian Ferentz enjoyed it, though?
No.
Maybe the one guy in college football that watched that game and said, I don't like this. Too many points. Way too much running up and down the field.
Speaking of Brian Ferentz, Chad, I looked it up. Right now, Iowa is averaging 22.2 points per game.
Way closer than I expected, by the way. Way closer.
That goose egg against Penn State's really going to ultimately, I think, be the deciding factor when it's all said and done. But yeah, for Ole Miss, Lane Kiffin, they were able to put together a really good game plan. And I mean, both these offenses were humming. You look at it, Jaden Daniels and Jackson Dart, both Jaden Daniels was slightly over 400 yards passing. Jackson Dart just slightly under 400 yards passing, but they were just fun to watch. And I mean, it was one of those, you just kind of knew how things were going to come down right to that wire. And that's exactly what happened. LSU had a chance on the final play to throw it in there.
Yeah, it was fun to watch. And then post-game, we had a lot of fun with a number of things that took place. I don't even know what we get to first because there were two great moments on the field. Now, it started with another field storming. Then we need to talk about the field storming now because it's gotten maybe a little bit out of hand. And the video that we're showing right now is an Ole Miss student just running on the field and just getting waylaid by an LSU player that he gets close to and runs into, and then he shouts an obscenity at him on his way off, which was the funniest part of the whole video. We can't play that part of it for you. Then the LSU player is being held back going after the Ole Miss student. Davey, I'm amazed the Ole Miss student running with the phone up, celebrating into his phone on selfie mode with the video. And it looks like either holds on to the phone or gathers himself quickly and picks the phone back up. That's the most impressive part.
I thought he was able to hold on the entire time, obviously taking a shot like he did. He's going to be wavering around a little bit as he composed himself. He looked stunned that he got hit, but of course you got a drunk college kid running up to a guy that's suffering from a very emotional last-minute loss. And I'm sure, obviously you're going to say a few things that aren't going to make the player exactly thrilled that you're in his presence. So, I mean, it'll be interesting to see if there's any things to come up as far as punishment goes for that player. But, again, this is what Greg Sankey and them are trying to cut down on, and you look at it from the financial situation. But do you think, was this warranted for a field storming? They're the 13th ranked team in the country.
No, it's not. It's not warranted for a field storming. And we're getting way too liberal with the field storming. Colorado has kind of had this trend going this year where they beat Colorado State and stormed the field, which makes no sense. They were a 3-touchdown favorite in the game. Now, a year ago when Jermaine Burton sideswipes an unsuspecting female on the field, that's something that should be disciplined. We're going to look at it a little bit differently when a drunk frat boy is running on the field screaming bleep LSU and runs next to a player and gets hit by the player. Now, right or wrong, and I'm not saying the player's in the right in this or any of that, but that's the type of thing that we look at and people would say, this is the danger of the field storming, is that guy sprinting around the field, filming himself like an idiot, then getting leveled by the LSU player. That's where the injury could happen.
You referenced Jermaine Burton hitting a Tennessee student last season. Well, what are your thoughts when it's a security guard that does something similar?
I think security guards have so the security guard that's the bouncer at the bar, that's like looking for the fight, that's getting a little too handsy or throwing people downstairs and doing that. Sometimes that security guard can take it a little far. But I do think that if there's one or two people on the field, and we're going to watch the security guard here and review the tape. First off, this guy should play offensive guard in the NFL with some of his abilities. Now, elbowing the girl in the cocktail dress that's running onto the field, probably not the way to go about it. And the best, she does yell back at the guy also as she's getting hit. But when you see that many people, just give up. This is a give-up moment. Now, if it's one drunk person running on the field, Davey, I think you have full ability to spear them, to take them out by any means necessary, minus a weapon. Take them out, get them down, get them off the field. When it's thousands of people storming onto the field, you sitting there like you've got, you're the little Dutch boy with a finger in the dam and the water's rushing over you, that's pointless. There's no need to be doing that.
This incident just kind of reminds me of so this is what Richard Jewell would probably be doing in this situation. That's what I kind of thought. It's like taking the job too serious, going too far. Now, obviously, Richard Jewell, great man, saved a ton of people, but it's just, I don't know. I'm making light of the situation, but I haven't heard.
They're both funny. I don't think anybody was hurt in either one. Now, to my knowledge. Also, is that the greatest advertisement for alcohol ever? That kid's response to getting hit by the college football player, the large SEC football player that decks this little skinny kid, and he gets up like nothing happened because he's so intoxicated. Now, he's going to feel it the next day, but I'm thinking, man, I never thought of alcohol as PED, but this is a performance-enhancing drug in this moment. When you can go dead sprint, get knocked on your ass, and jump right back up and then yell a profanity back at the player when you're running on the field, and you're this kid is not in the best shape. And the guy who hits him is about 3 times his size. Boy, never felt better about alcohol than watching that video.
I don't know if an alcohol brand probably wants to go with deal with tomorrow's consequences tomorrow.
Yeah.
Or today's consequences tomorrow. Yeah. I
remember one time me and my buddies, after a lot of drinks, decided, got home. This is, probably early, mid-20s. Got home from the bar, and a buddy, it was like an older house in Nashville, had a row of shrubs in his front yard, and we decided that we were just going to play football, like line up and go over the shrubs, like we're going over the top, and have handoffs, and we're hitting the other guy across the line, but the goal was to jump over the shrubs. And I remember waking up the next day feeling like I went 10 rounds with Mike Tyson and not really remembering why, and then thought about it and thought, oh, yeah, we drank a lot and then decided to hurl our bodies over shrubs. I'm scratched up all over from the shrubs. Not the best decision, and that's probably what that Ole Miss student was thinking also.
You were like playing between the hedges to the next level.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
This was a between the hedges type contest that was taking place. Wild night at Ole Miss. Big win for the Rebels, and all kidding aside, huge win for Lane Kiffin. We were questioning Lane Kiffin a lot this past week for not getting over the hump in that big game. That's a big win for Ole Miss. We've seen it a number of times already this year. Home field advantage certainly matters in college football. We're seeing that time and time again so far this season. Auburn and Georgia, another example of that.
Things can change, but we often talk about the SEC's dominance, but I was just pulling up their schedule, and if you look at it, moving forward, Ole Miss only has one ranked team left on their schedule as of right now.
The SEC West is going to be interesting. I know we're going to talk a little bit more about that division later, but the last year of the divisions in the SEC, Bama looks really good again, and we know they got good players. A&M, got to factor them in. They look good over the weekend against Arkansas is out, Mississippi State's out, Ole Miss, A&M, Bama, LSU has the one conference loss right now. It's going to be interesting in the SEC West. A lot of fun to follow that. Davey, it's always interesting when a toy chicken causes a fight and an altercation. Things almost got out of hand in Knoxville Saturday night. Not because Tennessee got their vengeance and put a beat down on Spencer Rattler in South Carolina, just like even though Josh Heupel wouldn't talk about it, we all knew the Vols were out for blood on Saturday night. The fans were out for blood. And they exacted that vengeance against Spencer Rattler, holding him down to a season low production-wise. They get the win. And then post-game, Javonte Spraggins, offensive lineman for Tennessee, who apparently makes a habit of this where he has a toy mascot of the opposing team, and if Tennessee wins, he goes and poses with said mascot. He got out a rubber chicken. I don't know if it was rubber or not, but a toy chicken to not taunt the Gamecocks directly, but apparently to go to the cameras. And Davie, South Carolina players took exception to this.
Yeah, it looks like it's like a stuffed toy, just like
not even a rubber chicken, a stuffed chicken.
Yeah, you give your kid, as like a stuffed tiger. I think he did it with Spraggins did this with LSU. He had a tiger there, but it's one of those things to where obviously props people think you're often going too far whenever those are brought out. And this seemed to be the case. I mean, South Carolina that defense didn't really have anything that they were going to be able to say after the fact based off how they played. But I'm fine with it. Talk the talk if you're backing it up on the field, and Tennessee was able to do that.
Well, our buddy Austin Price, who's been a guest on the show many times, also making a cameo in that video as the altercation takes place. It didn't lead to anything big. I'd wait till the opposing team's off the field. They don't hang around long after a loss, especially on the road. I don't think you have to go directly to the toy chicken once the game's over. You've got plenty of time. You can sing the alma mater. Then you can go and get the chicken once the players are off the field. If I just lost that way on the road, I'm probably not that excited about a guy immediately pulling a prop out below the bench of the seat and marching it around the field that way. So I get it from South Carolina's side. Not a reason for World War III or anything, but maybe just wait. Maybe just wait until the team leaves the field.
At least it didn't lead to fisticuffs like it did there at the end of Tennessee versus Florida.
It didn't lead to someone getting knocked down like that Ole Miss student when they took the field. We got to have a bigger discussion at some point about when and when not to storm the field. And I know every time somebody hears, oh, you're such a boomer, this is such a boomer argument, it's kids just having fun. I get it. I'm all for fun. I understand why field storming happens. And when we see that overhead shot of it taking place, it's incredible to look at. The optics of it is amazing when performed the right way and when pulled off. But there is a law of diminishing returns when we're storming the field every week.
Well, absolutely. And it's one of those things. I know Colorado, the most previous example where they stormed it back-to-back weeks. How often do you think, how much time should elapse between one field storming at a program to another field storming?
Well, you mean just program to program? I don't think one program storming the field should have an impact on the other.
No, within that same program. So it's like,
oh, yeah, not happening multiple times. I think it should be at least a year. I think you got to go a year between.
That. I mean, like, I know a lot of SEC teams, they probably go once every 5 to 10 years, I would say.
No, I'd say minimum 1 year, but I lean more 3 to 5. And if you're good enough to do it, to knock off the team worthy of the field storming, odds are you don't need to storm the field again in a year from then or months from then to prove how big of a win it was. Maybe that's just us. Also, no toy chickens until the team leaves the field. We've got no toy chickens. We've got no props for the next segment, but Disney Plus had some props for you to watch NFL. We'll discuss when we come back.
Good morning. The NFL has filed a grievance against the NFL Players Association over running backs being possibly coerced/coached into feigning injuries. That's right. Faking injuries is what the NFLPA suggested in memos to running backs whining about not getting guaranteed money. Well, let me tell you something. I don't blame the NFL. There are provisions in the collectively bargained agreement that say NFL players in general must give their best effort. Well, if you're telling NFL running backs to fake injuries, and have we seen NFL running backs fake injuries? I don't blame the NFL for getting a little crabby. Let's talk about it. Jonathan Taylor of my beloved Colts, he's out, had ankle surgery way back in November, still can't go. His agent said, however, that he could pass a physical right now. My thought is, if Jonathan Taylor could, quote, pass a physical right now, why is he on the PUP? The agent said this a week or two ago. If he knew he could pass a physical, maybe you sit out a game or two. You don't go on a 4-game PUP. But here you see Tom Pelissero saying what a lot of us that were a little bit crabby of. Filed a grievance over allegations the union advised running backs to consider feigning or exaggerating injuries to gain leverage in contract talks, and seeking an order for the union to cease and desist from such improper conduct. I think Jonathan Taylor is absolutely faking. Look, I don't know. What do I know? I know this, though. Jonathan Taylor walked around pretty good at training camp. Jonathan Taylor's been whining about this. Jonathan Taylor and his agent, as I said, have already said, yeah, he could pass a physical. Let me tell you about Austin Eckler, an ankle injury with no timetable for return. Really? I coached for 30 years. A lot of guys with ankle injuries, high ankle injuries, tweaked ankles, you name it, and everything in between. And there was always a timetable for them to return. But all of a sudden, Austin Eckler, who is the most vocal of the running backs, I can't return. I got an ankle. See, ankles are tough because there is swelling, there is black and blue. You do know, but also when you get healed from an ankle and you take a bad step, a lot of times on a heel, it can hurt and there's no outward sign. It's like mental health. You can say, I got mental health. It's like verbal abuse. You can say a guy verbally abused me. You can say anything you want. So Austin Eckler, Jonathan Taylor, certainly there are questions. I did not see the Saquon Barkley injury live. I saw it many, many times on replay. I guess he's hurt. We'll see how long Saquon Barkley stays out. There are some legitimate guys that are hurt. I think we all agree Nick Chubb certainly hurt. I think J.K. Dobbins hurt. Aaron Jones seems to be hurt. Chase Edmonds seems to be hurt. But you see what I'm doing here between Eckler and Barkley and Chubb and Taylor and Edmonds and Dobbins and Jones. You got a lot of running backs hurt. Why would I, if this was in fact run like a business, give guaranteed money to NFL running backs? They just get hurt. And truthfully, the Colts just won a road football game with a running back. Zach Moss looked all right. Got into a hole. Okay, fine. There's not a chance in holy hell that I am giving money to an NFL running back that is guaranteed for anything longer than a year. I'll give you a year's guarantee. I'll give you a 3-year deal, 1-year guarantee.
Boy, you know you're successful as a league when you've conquered all possible horizons out there. Every demographic, you've got them in. You've got the number one watched female demographic because Taylor Swift is hanging out of a suite at your game in Kansas City. Next week, she's going neutral, but she's there for the Jets, Chiefs. All the ladies of the world are watching. So what's the other horizon we can conquer? I know. Let's get children watching the game early in the morning on a Sunday. Not going to church, staying home to watch football. How are we going to do that, the NFL said? Well, we're going to make all the players Toy Story characters. And they're going to be in Andy's room, and we're going to show you the game as Toy Story. And that's exactly what they did. It's like the NFL is just saying now, let's just throw something to a wall and see if it works, because everything plays and everything makes money for us. And this is yet another example. By the way, I'm Chad Withrow. This is Hot Mike. And if you have not seen it, the clips yet, don't know how many of you watched it, but the NFL yesterday with their London game between Jacksonville and Atlanta decided to play out the game as toy icons in Andy's room from Toy Story, and people ate it up yesterday. I did not watch any of this live. I was actually at church at this point and did not see it. I did go back and watch clips from this when I got back. I'll be completely honest, and I don't think of myself as old or any of that. I understand the attempt. I don't know how this is any better than a child watching the actual football game. I don't know how this really draws anyone in. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm completely wrong on this, but I didn't find this that interesting at all with the Toy Story game yesterday that was on Disney+. Davey, did you enjoy this?
I did not enjoy it. The main takeaway that I had from this was that they had Booger McFarland on the call.
Yeah.
And you look back a couple of years ago and Booger McFarland's on Monday Night Football. And so kind of felt bad for the guy that this is what he's having to do at this point. I thought
was Jason Witten unavailable for this since he also got knocked off that broadcast?
He's still coaching, right?
Hey, Jason,
Yeah.
I know that we had a rough 1 year with you on Monday Night Football, but would you come back to call this game in Andy's room between Jacksonville and Atlanta?
I thought it was neat looking at the split screen of the game live and then how they made it look animated. I thought that was interesting, but as far as just sitting down to watch that, I wasn't going to. If there were two things that I was like, oh, it's neat that they incorporated that. So instead of having refs out there, whenever they needed to spot the ball, they had the claw, if you remember from, I think that was Toy Story 2 or 3. Can't exactly recall on that one, but the claw would just drop the ball where it needed to be. And then instead of having this is actually more efficient than the way they do the chains now for every 10 yards, but they had the Slinky dog. If they needed to back it up, like if it was 2nd and 15, Slinky would back up like 5 steps, and that would determine the distance to go.
Look, I judge everything, if it's hitting with kids or not, by my own kid's reaction. And my 8-year-old daughter did ask last night, can we watch Football Fun Day? And I kept asking, well, I don't even know what that means. And she said it's on Disney+. And I'm pretty sure that's what she was talking about. Because I went there and the first 3 shows were the game from that morning as Toy Story characters. So look, I'm clearly not the target demo for this, much like women being the target demo for Taylor Swift being at a game. But apparently it works. It hit with the kids. So who knew that could be a thing? Who knows what's going to happen in the AFC South also? You've got 4 teams right now at 2-2, 4 weeks into the season. And, Davey, I look at all 4 of these teams, and what we thought in the preseason about who was rebuilding and who is not going for it right now, who shouldn't be going for it right now and maybe should be rebuilding. That was the thought on the Titans. Jacksonville was the clear favorite coming into this season. Through 4 weeks, it's anyone's guess. I have no idea what's going to happen when you look at these 4 teams all tied at 2-2.
I mean, in a way, it's like week 0 all over again for these teams, just starting from square one. If I were to put money on it, I really I would just stay away because I don't trust any of these 4 teams. You look at, we'll say Jacksonville is the favorite heading into the season. They've definitely shown reasons for concern. That defense is not one that's going to be able to hold up well over the course of the season. Calvin Ridley had a great game 1. I know he had a touchdown in this game, but he's not exactly turned into that number 1 threat for Trevor Lawrence to always be able to go to. And then if I'm looking at, we'll say Indy and Houston, both starting 2 rookie quarterbacks, and I thought for the most part they've impressed me compared to what I thought they were going to do
good
moving forward. And then the Titans play well at home, but they have looked pretty rough on the road. So is that a trend that's going to continue? There's a lot to be desired from this conference, but I could still see at this point the winner of the AFC South having a losing record.
So, speaking of losing record, we know these two teams that we're about to talk about are going to have a losing record at the end of the year. At least we assume that will be the case. Both 0-4. Carolina Panthers, Chicago Bears, which leads us to the question of who wins first between these teams. We know what happened yesterday with the Bears. Complete collapse, up 21 points against previously winless Denver. Carolina blows the lead and loses to Minnesota. Looking at the games coming up, the Bears have the Commanders, the Vikings, and the Raiders. Carolina, while having a Week 7 bye, will play the Lions, Dolphins, Texans. Davey, if I had to guess right now on who wins first, I'm going to go Bears based on their schedule, but I really don't know. I'm not sure. Both teams are bad.
This is a pick your poison right here. I don't know why we're doing this now. I would say the Panthers win first, but I think it's going to be a situation where Andy Dalton actually has to come back in.
You think Andy Dalton's their best chance to win?
Right now, yes. Now, they're not going to bench Bryce Young, but again, I've still got questions about his frame. He takes one hit the wrong way. He's going to be hobbled for a bit. So I would put my money on the Panthers in this situation. The best chance, though, if you're looking at it, I don't think it'll happen because I think these next several days are just going to be awful for the Bears given how things transpired at the end of the Broncos game on Sunday. But Washington's probably the most winnable opponent, but I just don't trust Matt Eberflus at all. I feel better about Frank Reich and Bryce Young than I do Matt Eberflus and where this team's at. I mean, the other thing for the Bears is they're just telling players that are healthy scratches just to stay at home. It's like, we don't even want you around the program.
Yeah, that's not good. Not good at all. And, yeah, again, it's one of those that I've long said. It's almost equally impressive in the NFL for the team that tries to go undefeated and accomplishes it, which almost never happens. The team that can go undefeated in reverse is also difficult in the league where everyone's designed to go 500. So kudos to the team that goes 0-17 this year. And we might have one of them between those two teams so far this year.
It's just crazy, too, going back to the Bears, the fact that Justin Fields has his best game as a pro where he throws for over 300 yards, 4 touchdowns, and yet they still find a way to blow a 21-point lead and lose. That's almost unheard of in the National Football League, that you can have something go so well and yet still be so incompetent you ultimately come away with an L.
Time for a little college football overreaction, Davey. You've got some items that we can get into about overreaction from this past weekend and some of the results.
I do, but I'm just going to pose this question to you first, Chad, just kind of going back off of this. So play the game, start, bench, or cut.
Okay.
I got 3 quarterbacks for you. Number 1, Justin Fields with the Bears. Number 2, you've got Zach Wilson with the Jets. And then number 3, I'm going to throw in – who should I throw in on this one? I had the question, I lost it. I'm just going to be fully transparent with you on that.
Sam Howell, maybe?
We'll throw Sam Howell in.
I don't
there.
think that was the one you had. Was it another rookie?
Let you all in behind the scenes. No, I think it's all players that it wasn't their first year. Maybe it was Desmond Ridder. I don't know. They're all bad options.
Yeah, start, bench, cut with these 3. In this case, I am going to start Sam Howell, bench Justin Fields. Oh, Zach Wilson had his best game yet, even though he had the big mistake last night. I'm going to go start Sam Howell, bench Zach Wilson, cut Justin Fields, based on what I've seen.
Okay.
All bad, though. All bad options.
I would be cutting Zach Wilson and benching Justin Fields, just hoping that I get a coach that can actually tap into his talent, because while the passing ability is subpar, to say the least, at times, I know this past weekend was the exception to that, that rushing ability is just something I would want to be able to utilize. So
the lesson here is, Davey, when you have a good idea like you did earlier, write it down. Write that third option down.
True, yep.
You had 2 of the 3. You got to jot down the third.
I know, man. sneaks up on you.
The good news is you did write down some great college football overreactions from the weekend that you have for us right now.
I do. And so to get us started, Chad, kind of starting the conversation earlier today about who's number one, Georgia does not deserve to be number one. Is that an overreaction, or is that legit?
It's an overreaction. They deserve to be number one. They're the two-time defending champion. Look, if we're going based on results in 2023 alone, probably not. There's been teams like a Michigan, even though their schedule's been weak, that have looked more impressive in their wins than Georgia has so far. But I kind of like the fact that college football does legislate a bit on history. And it's not just this season. It's the end of the season before. It's your program's vitality. It's your program's history that all factors into these decisions. So given the fact that Georgia has won 2 in a row and they're going for 3 straight, I think it's an overreaction to say they should not be number one right now. They're the number one team until proven otherwise. They survived a test on the road. They didn't play very well. Auburn had chances, but they come out on top. So I'm going to go overreaction to say Georgia does not deserve to be number one. Now, if it's solely this season alone, which college football does not do, and they don't do it that well, yeah, you can make a case for Washington being more impressive, for Texas, for Michigan, and for some others. But I'm going to say in this case, I'm fine with Georgia being number one right now.
As of today, October 2nd, 2023, it has been 667 days since Georgia last lost a football game.
And if Georgia keeps playing this way, that number is going to go away. And it'll take care of itself, and they won't be ranked number one at some point soon. But for now, leave them at number one. Totally fine with that.
All right, Chad. Next up, Notre Dame is the best one-loss team.
No, I don't think they are. And I would have a different answer if Notre Dame would have gone and after getting a 10-0 lead in that game, taken control and handled Duke. That was way too close, the way that game started. Notre Dame's got some issues offensively, and I don't think I'd be saying that with Sam Hartman in the start that he had. Defense looked good again. I think offensively they leave a little bit to be desired, especially deep down the field. And I think Jaden Greathouse is going to be a really good receiver for Notre Dame. But I'm going to say no on that one. Give me Bama. Give me Utah. Give me Oregon State. Hell, give me Ole Miss right now. I think you could make an argument for all of those teams with one loss being better than Notre Dame right now. If I had to just take one and say I believe this team would beat this team head-to-head with one loss, it's Bama. Bama's better than Notre Dame. And I'm sorry, Notre Dame fans, that might suck for you to hear, especially given the last time you two played and the way it looked on the field in a national championship game. But it's reality. They've got better players. They've got more NFL players. They're figuring out who they are from an identity standpoint and how physical they want to play. They've got better running backs. They don't have a better quarterback. Sam Hartman's the better quarterback than Jalen Milroe. But I think Bama is probably the best one-loss team in America right now.
Okay, Notre Dame is the highest-ranked one-loss team. They're 10th, but Alabama not far behind at number 11. Next up, the Pac-12 is the best conference in 2023.
This is not an overreaction. This is fact. And I hats off to SEC fans for not fighting a losing argument right now. I'm not hearing a lot of clamoring from SEC fans about, oh, those teams aren't any good. Oregon State, Utah, they're not physical. They're not good. No, they're being quiet on this. Why? Because SEC fans know what superior football looks like. They see it every single year, except this year. So they know what it looks like when they're the best. They usually are the best. They have been for the last 15, 20 years in most seasons. They're not this year. And SEC fans know it. Why? Because SEC fans know what greatness looks like in college football. I'm not seeing it this year, nor are SEC fans. The Pac-12 has it. That's a great conference this year.
I would say one of the main reasons for that is I think I would take 5 quarterbacks out of the Pac-12 before I would take the top quarterback in the SEC. And just like off the top of my head, Caleb Williams, obviously, Bo Nix, Michael Penix Jr., Shedeur Sanders, and give me Cam Ward. Big believer in him.
Yeah, I think when you get to Shedeur Sanders, Cam Ward, or Jaden Daniels, it's close. But, yeah, it's a better quarterback lead, no doubt about it, especially at the top in the Pac-12.
All right. The next conversation, speaking of quarterbacks in the Pac-12, but it's Caleb Williams will repeat as the Heisman Trophy winner.
No. Michael Penix Jr., the name you have to say slow to make sure you say it correctly, is the Heisman Trophy winner. I said it preseason. I will say it again. That guy is a dude, and he is playing like one this year. And that offense is fun to watch. It is precise. He can hit the deep ball. He can hit intermediate routes. Great in the short passing game. Smart player at quarterback. Michael Penix Jr., your Heisman Trophy winner, not Caleb Williams.
And finally, Chad, something we've seen a lot but this year, I don't know. Alabama will win the SEC West.
I'm going to say yes. This is not an overreaction. And look, we're all guilty of letting history play a part in our arguments with anything in college football. Nick Saban is F-bombing people again on the sideline. That happened in their game against Mississippi State. That video now is viral. The fact that he is screaming and cursing and F-bombing his assistant coaches into the headset and turning to the sideline and doing it, Bama is back, baby. Nick Saban's not retiring. He's fired up. He's ready to go. This team has found their quarterback, albeit it's not always going to be pretty with Jalen Milroe. They know exactly who they need to be able to win games in the rugged SEC. And even with it being down, it's still a rugged conference and tough to win games in this conference. Alabama's going to win the SEC West. They're going to face Georgia in the SEC championship game. That is what's going to happen. And I've seen enough now from Alabama's improvement to be able to say so. It's going to be fun to watch either way, though. Hey, Ryder Cup was fun to watch at times, especially fun to watch if you're a European watching this show right now. Mark Harris, he's American. He's going to join us next from OutKick. This is Hot Mike with Hutton and Withrow.
Hello, good morning, everybody. Welcome on into OutKick the Morning. I am your host, Charlie Arnold. Now, when it comes to race baiting in sports, no one does it better than ESPN. It's one of the reasons I was frustrated while working there. And now the Disney-owned company is out to prove just how overwhelming racism really is in the world of sports. Later this month, ESPN Plus will debut a new series on their streaming platform called Skin in the Game with Dr. Ibram X. Kendi. Now, if you aren't familiar with Kendi, he is a so-called anti-racist. He's a writer who makes a living trying to prove just how racist everybody else is. One of his books defines racism as referring to policies and ideas that create or permit any differences in outcomes in racial groups, to which I think it's clear racism goes both ways these days. But that's not a double narrative you will find in this series. Instead, the first episode will focus on Black athletes who use public platforms to protest injustices and what it costs to speak up. And in the second, why Black female athletes are considered polarizing when they prioritize their mental health, just as a few examples. Now, I appreciate highlighting athletes who have done incredible things in the world of sports, whether they are Black, white, Asian, Latin, or otherwise. But using Ibram X. Kendi to lead this series just feels like a setup. Is he going to mention that in these episodes, there was an occurrence in 2016 where Colin Kaepernick wore socks to a 49ers practice that showed cartoon policemen done up as pigs? Now, this even being prior to Kaepernick's sit-down of the national anthem during San Francisco's August preseason game. Or will they mention how in 2022, former ESPN anchor and sports analyst Jemele Hill famously called Trump a white supremacist and his voters all racist? Until the documentary airs, we can only ask one question. Will it be fair and balanced? Seems highly unlikely. Now, considering the host, handpicked by ESPN, he has incited his own racist remarks against people that don't look like him in the past, so I don't see how any way, in any shape, any form, this is an unbiased series. Now, speaking of the past, once upon a time, guys, I also worked for the Fox station in Indianapolis, and I covered the Colts. One of the guys I covered in that locker room, former NFL safety Sergio Brown, who went on to play for 6 years in the league. When I met him, he was talented, he was smart, and an all-around very, very pleasant guy. So I was startled to come across headlines 2 days ago that his mother had been murdered and that he was nowhere to be found. Then yesterday, the story got even weirder. From an Instagram burner account, which seems to belong to Brown, a video was posted of Brown making some very, very bizarre claims. Check it out.
I got it. Dorian. P. Sherman.
There's something going
42,
on with the
Wallaby Way,
screen.
Sydney.
It's going.
Oh my gosh. I can't. Just keep swimming. Just keep swimming. What the missing? They ain't never seen Finding Nemo. What the going on? This is traumatic. Lucky I know how to say a joke. You
can hear him say he thought his mom was on vacation and the FBI and Maywood Police Department in Illinois had kidnapped him. This is a part of the video that you didn't see, but he goes on to make very, very weird claims. He also talks about fake news. I mean, it's clear Sergio Brown has lost it. And making it even worse for Sergio, one of his mom's neighbors told a local news station that police told him that they saw Brown through the door's Ring camera and light a bonfire to burn his mother's clothes.
We're back. Hot Mic with Hutton and Withrow across the OutKick Network. I'm Chad Withrow. Jonathan Hutton will be back with us on Wednesday. So every time I watch international competition anyway, I kind of tell myself, I'm not going to get emotionally invested in the outcome, and it's just not going to do it, not going to happen again. And every time I start to watch, I automatically start to get a little bit angry when the American side is not doing well. And I watched quite a bit of the Ryder Cup over the weekend, early morning, even on a football fall weekend, made it possible to watch and then watch football all day after. And it was not a good weekend for the Americans at the Ryder Cup. Mark Harris, he writes about a lot of things, golf one of them for OutKick.com, and does a terrific job. He's on with us right now to recap exactly what happened outside of Rome for the Americans at the Ryder Cup. Mark, welcome in, man. Appreciate you doing this.
Thanks, Chad. Great to talk a little golf with you.
Absolutely. So where did things go wrong for the Americans? I know there was talk of them fighting illness on day one, but it was really just a terrible start for the Americans in this contest.
It went wrong as soon as they stepped foot on the property on Friday, basically. You go 0 for 4 in foursomes, and you can't dig out that hole. And all the credit in the world needs to go to Luke Donald, the captain of the Team Europe. You get to, as the home team, you pick if you want to go foursomes or 4-ball. In the opening session, he chose foursomes. The U.S. in the last 2 Ryder Cups overseas have a 2-12-2 record in foursomes. And he recognized that the U.S. team doesn't have those dogs in the back where they have that underdog mentality, for whatever reason that might be, that they don't want to dig out of a hole. So he said, we're going to put our big boy pants on. If you want to come get it, put yours on. And they go 0 for 4 on Friday. Then in the Friday afternoon, you blink and it's 6.5 to 1.5 after the opening 2 sessions. And like I said, they just don't have, for whatever reason, they just didn't have any drive to want to fight. Then they come in late on Saturday, kind of have some inspiring play down the stretch. And it felt like they picked up a couple of points in the standings, but all they did was draw the whole day. So you start Sunday with 5 points down. There's too many top dogs on the Europe, not enough on the U.S. kind of bottom half. And like you said, the illness thing, who knows if that was true? That was quite the statement to make after team goes and lays an egg on Friday morning. It was just uninspiring. That's the word I keep going back to.
How much of this falls on Zach Johnson? And just overall, do you feel like the captain gets a little bit too much of the credit or blame at times in the Ryder Cup over the years?
Yeah, for sure. I kind of put a bow on it and wrote about kind of some final thoughts from the week. And that was kind of one of my points. And that's just, sports fandom, sports people that, watch this. You got to react to something. And the captains of the Ryder Cup, both sides, good and bad, we just kind of overinflate that for whatever reason. It's been like that for forever. Zach Johnson isn't the one hitting the golf shots. He's putting some pairings together or whatever, but he's not out there missing putts. On Friday morning, you had guys chunking it into the water. You got some skanky chips from Scotty Scheffler, probably one of the best short games in the world, the number 1 player in the world. Zach Johnson didn't hit in the golf shots, but a lot of the blame has to be put on him for his Friday morning pairings. To start the Ryder Cup, you're trying to break a 30-year streak losing streak in Europe. 1993 is the last time you went over there. And the pairing you bring out right out of the gate is Scotty Scheffler and Sam Burns, who is a rookie. The first 4 matches, you don't have Justin Thomas and Jordan Spieth, the 2 guys you've been going to work with. Your inspiring captain's pick was Justin Thomas. He doesn't see the course until Friday afternoon. If you wanted to kind of send a message like, hey, I'm back in JT, and he's the inspiring guy on the team, he's going to get into it with the crowd. He's going to bring that from the jump. To not have him play, or Brooks Koepka, that's the same kind of guy too. He can be, at least. He doesn't play Friday morning. So, hindsight's 2020. If, they go out and flip the script and it's 3-1 after Friday morning, we're not talking about this. But it was, it's just not what I would do, and whatever anybody else you talk to, it was the wrong decision, both analytically and just on paper.
Mark Harris with OutKick.com. He's written about the Ryder Cup from this past weekend, covers a lot of things for the site. At It's Mark Harris. It is Mark Harris on X or on social media. Mark, who was the most disappointing member of the U.S. team this weekend in your eyes?
Well, it's easy to point to Ricky Fowler, but you go back to that sickness thing. There's kind of the rumor out there that he might have had the bug the worst. He only plays 2 matches the whole week. But I think it's got to be Scotty Scheffler, right? He's the world's #1 player. He doesn't win a match. On Saturday morning, they go out in 4-ball, him and Brooks Koepka, and he beat 9-7. It's the worst loss in Ryder Cup history in 4-ball. And you can't have the world #1 and a 5-time major winner going against, granted, Victor Hovland's arguably probably the best player walking the planet right now, but his teammates, Ludvig Åberg, who's a Swedish kid that was playing college golf at Texas Tech 6 months ago. Now, the guy looks like he was built in a lab to play golf. He might, he's tabbed as the next great European, but you can't have your 2 dogs go out there and just lay that kind of a goose egg losing 9-7. It goes to Scotty Scheffler. Jordan Spieth was bad too. People say that he probably shouldn't have been on the team. He wasn't, he was bad. His Ryder Cup record now after this weekend is now a losing record. He's, part of that boys club with JT. So he was there. He can bring that fire, but there was no Spieth magic like we saw at Whistling Straits last year and years past, to where he can kind of bring that juice. And it was just uninspiring to where, you can't have Scotty Scheffler and Jordan Spieth not win a match and expect to even be close to the Europeans, and they weren't.
We've really seen guys over the years varnish their reputation in this contest and help themselves. And then suddenly they have a reputation for being a dog on the course because of how they perform at a Ryder Cup. Who were a couple of European guys that really jumped out to you that helped themselves in this contest?
Yeah, the one that comes to mind is Tyrrell Hatton. He's obviously a well-known guy. He's won on the PGA Tour. He's won in Europe a while. He's been kind of I guess last Ryder Cup was his first, but he's one of those guys that's just super steady, top 10 player in the world. He wins 3.5 points for the week. I think he finished in a tie for second for most European points. He's one of those guys where you could look back and he keeps building confidence as these years go on. And like you said, the Ryder Cup can really build it for the Europeans, especially at that side of things, and how you keep this streak going and all this kind of stuff. You want to point to Tommy Fleetwood as a guy that got a little juice from this. Even he hasn't won he hasn't won in North America. He doesn't have that PGA Tour win, so who knows what that brings to him. But he's certainly a stalwart. I don't think he's lost in the Ryder Cup. I think he's either drawn or won every match he's played in, or singles wise at least. So those are 2 guys that kind of come to mind. And on the U.S. side, it's Patrick Cantlay and Max Homa. Obviously, Patrick Cantlay's kind of been a silent killer for years now. He's got a FedEx Cup under his belt. No majors yet, but it's always been, win, not if with him. And kind of Max Homa's in the same boat. But those 2 guys were the only pulse that they had Saturday and Sunday, it felt like, for the American side.
Let's look ahead now. 2 years from now, based on what you saw in this one, what should the Americans be focused on? Whether it be the combination of players playing together or whatever it is, what should they focus on?
I think it's super simple from the jump. I think you have to look at this schedule setup that we've had this year. The PGA Tour the FedEx Cup playoffs ended 5 weeks ago, 5 weeks before the start of the Ryder Cup. The only 2 guys, to my recollection, that played a competitive round of golf in that 5-week span was Justin Thomas and Max Homa. Played in the Fortnite Championship a couple weeks ago. kind of a fall swing event on the tour. But the Europeans, their season was still going, and all these guys, most of these guys, the 75% of them were still playing golf a week, 10 days before the opening tee shot at the Ryder Cup. So you knew that they were in form, and they were playing well. Matt Fitzpatrick, all those guys were playing, and they were playing very, very well. Ludwig Aberg won a couple weeks ago. So they had some juice going on their side to where they didn't have that lull to where you kind of had to wake up. As weird as that sounds, when you've got 60,000 people looking at you at the Ryder Cup, you have to wake up. But these guys were already kind of in that mode of playing competitive golf for the past few weeks. And it just doesn't make sense to me how that's okay from the PGA of America or PGA Tour side of things. Like if you think about it, would Brooks Koepka or Scottie Scheffler take 5 weeks off before they showed up to a major championship? Like if we're going to hold the Ryder Cup to that kind of standard, let's maybe get the easy part done and get the schedule working in our favor to where you can at least have some guys playing golf, or if they try to, break a 30-year streak or, go overseas to try to beat these guys. It just, that's number one for me. And hopefully we see a change like that to where we can make it a little bit more, I don't know, competitive, at least going into it. It's a little bit easier to kind of analyze.
I'm always amazed how seemingly, in a gentleman's sport, these guys can sort of turn on and turn off the hostility for this competition when they go against each other. Brooks Koepka had some things to say about Jon Rahm, being a child. Do they legitimately not like each other at times during this? And is it easy to flip on and off? Or have you seen times where there's been lingering hostilities? And could that be a thing moving forward now?
Yeah, Brooks is kind of the outlier where he's just, king troll. He knows how to stir a pot. He posted that photo yesterday of some guys in live gear. He just stirs the pot a little bit. But yeah, Rory McIlroy over the years, the famous one a few years ago where he drops a bomb of a putt on Patrick Reed and he goes crazy, and it was an American Ryder Cup and Patrick Reed shushes him back. And you have that kind of stuff, but it is super interesting to where they can just flip that switch to where like they look like they want to kill each other after they make a putt, and then they can just turn it off. And we saw that, this weekend with Cantlay and Rory McIlroy and Cantlay's caddy, Joe LaCava, Tiger Woods' former caddy, getting into it. Even, Rory was still heated in the parking lot leaving the place. Bones had to get in. JT's caddy, Bill Mickelson's former caddy. So, yeah, it's interesting. I think that genuinely in the moment, I think Rory McIlroy was very, very mad, and he kind of apologized like that wasn't cool as far as Bones stuff goes. But, yeah, it's interesting that they can, like you pointed out, that they can flip it off and on. Even Justin Thomas, he gave it all Sunday. Anytime he did anything, he was doing the imaginary hat tip for Patrick Cantlay and giving it back to the crowd. And then, as soon as he walks off the final hole, he's just, I'm a professional golfer. That's just kind of what it is. But there's that mutual respect, I think, at the Ryder Cup to where the fans can do whatever they want. The players can do whatever they want. It's just all fun competition, and a little bit more fun for the Euros this time around.
No doubt about it. Mark, you mentioned the photo from Koepka. What is the latest? Walk us through that, but also what is the latest with LIV, PGA, merger happening, how all of that is going to look moving forward? It's a story that's definitely gone on the back burner since that happened, and everyone was mad at Jay Monahan in the beginning of it. But what is the latest with it?
Right. I wrote about it yesterday. The answer still is kind of who knows. Who knows about Koepka's photo? They could have just been having some fun at kind of the after party. These guys, win or lose, they have a large after party after every Ryder Cup. They even I saw a couple of the wives of the Americans were hanging out in the Euro party. Just a big party afterwards. So who knows if that was a sober photo taken? But yeah, I don't know what the photo is. And then nobody knows what the future of LIV technically is. With this merger coming up, and they want the deadline to be at the end of this year, at the end of December, to kind of get something really concrete here. The PGA Tour is merging with the Saudi Arabia Investment Fund, which in turn is LIV Golf, but it's, two kind of separate entity kind of deals where we don't know what LIV looks like. LIV could still be separate. They could kind of do this thing where we don't have these answers to it at all. We know that they're going to have a for-profit entity that they have not named yet, Saudis and the PGA Tour. At least that's, the plan right now. But the answer, and I'm sick of saying it, but the answer is kind of who knows. It's a guessing game until something falls, which it feels like it's been going on for years now, but it's only been a couple months.
One last thing for you, Mark, on this one, and you know, taking the all the obvious topics that we've all discussed ad nauseum, the sports washing, everything else that goes along with this, and taking what elements of LIV is going to enter the PGA Tour. What is an area that just money would help? That you watch the PGA Tour and how it's conducted or whatever happens, and you think, okay, with Saudi Arabian money, they could help out this aspect of it. Is there anything that needs improving that you see that this influx of cash now could help?
This may sound like a simple answer, but I think it's the TV broadcast. Like, if you watched the Ryder Cup this weekend and were active on Twitter during any of it, I mean, it was horrific how bad the coverage was at some points. I mean, at some point during Saturday's action, when all that stuff was going on and Patrick Cantlay was going down the stretch and single-handedly beating Rory McIlroy, well, behind that was the Jordan Spieth and Justin Thomas match, and it went 50 minutes on the broadcast without showing a single shot of that match that was absolutely still up for grabs, when the other two they kept showing were essentially over. And we go 50 minutes without it. They have the playing through thing on NBC and USA was just a train wreck. You've got guys like conceding matches when there's a commercial going on next to it about going to buy the next Pepsi. And then you've got at one point on Friday, you know, they have the scoreboard on the bottom and it'll update throughout the round. Well, they updated the scoreboard first, and then they went back and showed us, oh, this just happened. Ludwig Aberg, let's see if he makes this putt to win the hole. When if you were paying attention to the scoreboard,
hey, Mark,
flipped.
I'm sorry, I got to cut you off because we got to get to a break. But hey, great work, man. Appreciate you joining us. Thanks so much.
Appreciate it, Chad.
Plenty more to get into, including Pauly Shore wants to play Richard Simmons, and I, for one, can't wait to see it. That's next.
What you're experiencing is the bold taste of a Southern legend. Old Smoky Moonshine and Whiskey, authentic Tennessee mountain-style spirits. We believe in crafty flavors that were born from tradition but defy expectation, and pioneering a new experience with every sip. Because if it doesn't do this, it ain't this. Old Smoky Moonshine and Whiskey. Come on. Old Smoky Moonshine and Whiskey. Taste of a Southern legend.
back. It's Hot Mike with Hutton and Withrow across the OutKick Network. I'm Chad Withrow. Jonathan Hutton will be back with us on Wednesdays down in Tampa, working a charity event for Logan Ryan's Animal Rescue Fund. Hey, you want to get on the action right now? You can do so with PointsBet. Right now, exclusively for first-time PointsBet users, you can grab this unique offer. PointsBet users can get up to $1,000 in second chance bets. If your first bet doesn't go as planned, PointsBet has your back with a second chance. Get this offer by visiting OutKick.com/bet. Complete the registration process with PointsBet and make your first bet. If your first bet happens to lose, that's when the second chance bet comes into play. Remember, terms and conditions apply. Must be 21 or older to gamble. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Head to OutKick.com/bet. Monday Night Football tonight. Seahawks, Giants. Davey, we're going to let you give your bet first on this game.
Chad, I've been big on the receivers as of late. I mean, it's not a show that I'm on if Puka Nacua doesn't get a mention, but he did absolutely cash that over the weekend.
I was thinking about you. I saw him even interviewed after the game, and I'm thinking, here is Davey's Rookie of the Year.
Yes, he is. But the wide receiver I'm putting money on to score an anytime touchdown tonight is DK Metcalf. Got that at plus 145. I think it's one of those games where we're actually going to get a good Monday night game. It's not going to be one where we get a blowout one way or another. And I expect to see DK get a couple of red zone opportunities, and he's going to pull one down and obviously get that anytime touchdown.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a really good game, too. I love home underdogs. Give me Giants money line tonight in this game at MetLife Stadium.
Do I need to remind you of Daniel Jones's record in primetime games?
It's not good. I know that.
Yeah.
He does not like nightfall, does not like moonlight, that Daniel Jones. What is it? Do you have it in front of you?
He's 1-12.
Okay.
So
2-12. Daniel Jones gets to 2-12 tonight. Give me the Giants money line in this one. So I saw this tweet last week. I think it may have been a Facebook post. I don't even know why I was on Facebook. I haven't been on there in years, but apparently I was. And I saw that Pauly Shore, and I had to double check to make sure this wasn't fake, is trying to play Richard Simmons in a biopic. And when I saw this, I thought, and here it is. He posted, I've noticed all the reactions to me playing Richard Simmons in a new biopic. So I reached out to him. I heard he's living deep in Big Bear. We've been playing phone tag. Yes, he still has a phone. I'm trying to make it happen for you guys. Be optimistic. In the meantime, hit up Hulu, Amazon, Disney, HBO, and all the big producers. I definitely can morph into this guy. I'll see you at the Academy Awards 2025. Now, it sounds funny, right? It sounds almost like a joke. But then I started thinking, man, Pauly Shore probably could morph into Richard Simmons. And anytime you have to just outwardly petition the big studios and streamers on social media, probably not a great place to start if you're trying to get a movie made. But maybe, just maybe, he can pull this off, Davey.
Maybe. And, I mean, the 1990s were Pauly Shore's go-to time. It's one of those things. I was pulling up his IMDb page because I have trying to think of the last thing I've seen him in maybe the last 10 to 15 years. And I don't recognize any of these projects that he's worked on.
I didn't know that he's done anything in the last 10 to 15 years.
A lot of this stuff looks like he's doing voice work. And it's more cartoon-type stuff. But, I mean, the guy, well, speaking of which, I mean, the Goofy movie was where I first learned of Pauly Shore as a kid. But, yeah, I mean, I loved Pauly back in the day. I don't know if he can pull this off. Like, he's not, no offense, but he's not a great actor. He's just very typecast. So seeing him having to play an actual person and embody that, I'm a little hesitant. Now, would I watch it? Yeah, I'd check it out. But, man, that's going to be a tough sell.
Well, I didn't think Brendan Fraser was a good actor either in all of his roles. And then, he got fat and won an Oscar most recently. So, look, it can happen. It can happen for anyone.
Can.
But I just look at that, the last picture of Pauly Shore now, and especially where he's next to Richard Simmons, and I'm thinking, physically, he could play the role. Now, would Richard Simmons' life be worthy of an Oscar performance from the actor? I don't know. Maybe. Either way, I want to watch. Get the right writing team involved. Get the right network involved or streaming service, and maybe he can pull this off. I started watching last night Reptile, this movie on Netflix with Justin Timberlake.
Benicio del Toro.
Benicio del Toro's in it. Alicia Silverstone, I think, is also in it. Speaking of the 90s, I think Pauly Shore and Alicia Silverstone were at their height together at the same time, right around 1994. I want to say they probably reached their apex of their careers at the same time.
Sounds like the year Son-in-Law came out.
Yeah, Son-in-Law, In the Army Now was another, I think, Pauly Shore movie.
93 for Son-in-Law.
Alicia Silverstone, though, was great in a couple of Aerosmith music videos. Clueless, obviously, was her big role. 1995, I want to say, for Clueless. Paul Rudd's start in that movie also. Anyway, I wanted to work in one segment of the show where we talked about Pauly Shore and Alicia Silverstone at the same time. But I'm watching Reptile now, and I noticed I made it about 12 minutes in last night before falling asleep. Not because the movie's bad. It's actually interesting. I just get really tired at a certain time of night. But Alicia Silverstone popped on the screen, I believe, married to Benicio del Toro in the film.
Okay.
So I'm hooked. I'm in on Reptile now. And I'm also in on Pauly Shore as Richard Simmons. So Dan Dockich is apparently out on Rodney Harrison having a job, is what I hear from Don't At Me. I was a guest on Don't At Me today. Dan always has strong takes, does a great show. I didn't even know this was a controversy until someone brought it up during the studio that Dan was all fired up about Rodney Harrison in a question, Davey, that he asked Chris Jones post-game. Is that correct?
That is correct. On last night's Sunday night, or football night in America, Rodney Harrison was interviewing Chris Jones at the studio desk out there on the field, and we got audio of what Rodney was asking Chris.
Was Zach better tonight than what you anticipated he would be watching him on tape? And you can be honest.
Honestly, if I'm being completely honest, we knew it was going to be a battle. He's continuing to get better week in and week out, and he's continuing to lead week in and week out.
But watching that tape, man, you got to look at this dude and say, "Oh, he is garbage." Like we should really tear him apart earlier.
Like I said, Zach Wilson is special, man. You just got to give the guy time. You know what I mean?
Wait. Did you say Zach Wilson is special?
Yeah.
I think he had a special night, but I don't think he's special. I've got to prove that you're special because you proved it over a course of time. He's not special. I'm just saying, Chris.
Hey, listen.
I'm just saying.
I've got no issue with anything that he said right there. I mean, to say Zach Wilson is special, I kind of commend Rodney Harrison for speaking up and calling BS on that. He's not special. We talked about Lou Holtz always going over the top with the opponent, talking about how great they were until it was Ryan Day, obviously. And Ohio State had not many good things to say about him. But there's nothing wrong with what Rodney Harrison said right there. He's trying to get an honest response out of him. If you watch film on Zach Wilson and you're Chris Jones, you're seeing some trash film based on the last few games. There's nothing wrong with what he said during that soundbite.
Do you think
Am I missing something?
It might have been the approach. He's constantly. I get you're trying to get.
I mean, he's incredibly unlikable. Like I've never liked Rodney Harrison. I once watched Rodney Harrison with PK in the desert at a Super Bowl curse him out for putting a phone up, take a photo of him on Radio Row. So I mean, I get that Rodney Harrison can be unlikable, but I mean, Chris Jones honestly said this guy's special. Or was he being sarcastic when he said that?
He seemed to be pretty genuine.
Yeah. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that or what he said.
The only thing I would say is he just kept at it. And I think that now Jets coach Robert Saleh did address this. He said that Rodney ended up calling Zach this morning and apologized for the incident. Is this an incident worth apologizing for, Chad?
No, not at all. And look, Zach Wilson's got bigger problems than this. Zach Wilson last night for the first time, Chris Collinsworth on the broadcast said it best, said the guy's playing quarterback. He looks like an NFL quarterback. There were a couple of drives where he was great. That's his best performance as a Jet, but it ended with him fumbling a snap. And that ended up losing the game for the Jets. So we have to bring that point up also. He seemed to handle it right. He apologized to his team. But if I'm Zach Wilson and I hear that, all you can say is, back to Rodney Harrison, yeah, my film hasn't been good the last couple of games. I had a good night. He did have a special night. Maybe that leads to something else, but, I mean, Rodney Harrison's calling it like he sees it in that one.
Do you think part of this conversation is because, for once, now I find myself falling into this camp, but I actually felt bad for Zach Wilson last night. And it was like maybe the first time I've felt that way towards him as a player because he's putting together a really good performance. And after they panned to him on the sidelines after the fumble had occurred, he's saying it's my fault. I'm the reason we lost. And I think a lot of people just kind of resonated with him in that moment of being like, you can tell this actually means a lot to him. And it's not a situation where, I don't know, they would take like Chase Claypool, for example, not putting forth the effort, and he's not with his team right now for a reason. I just think with Zach in that moment, you saw the personal matter actually impact you. And so a lot of people are coming to his defense because of that.
Yeah, I felt bad for him watching him on the sideline and just the way that game ended because he did play well. And they were down 17-0 like that. And he got the Jets back in it. And Jets defense was playing hard. So sucks to lose the game that way. But Zach Wilson is an 80s movie villain. Let's face it. The guy's Johnny Lawrence, if we're talking Karate Kid back in the 80s. That's what he looks like. That's kind of the demeanor that he puts off at times. There was this sense, though, last night, Davey, that he sort of morphed into Johnny Lawrence from Cobra Kai, where suddenly he's the sympathetic figure and someone you have empathy for and you're not rooting against. He's not straight villain. You feel bad for him. I can see that. There was a change happening over the course of that game from Zach Wilson as Johnny Lawrence, 80s high school movie villain, take your girl type of guy, especially your mom. They changed from that to Johnny Lawrence, Cobra Kai, Johnny Lawrence on Netflix. Maybe that happened.
After last night's performance, do you envision the Jets sticking with this guy for the rest of the year? Do you think he's able to turn it around enough to where they're able to just finish out the season with him? Or are you expecting Trevor Siemian, another guy to get called up? Where do you see this going for
I
the
think
New York
even
Jets?
more he's the guy now. I mean, if Robert Saleh wasn't going to remove him after the last game and the game before that, he's going to roll with him now. He actually showed signs of life last night for the first time. He showed some impact within the offense for the first time. So, yeah, I think he probably sticks around. And I don't know that you're going to do much better other than just changing it up, right? I mean, I think the way they're cash-strapped also, like I think about it like Kyler Murray, right? If Kyler Murray got healthy and decided to play, is he better than Zach Wilson? Yes. Can they make it work based on Aaron Rodgers coming back next year and what they've committed to this team already? I'm not a capologist. I don't know. But it feels like now at 1-3, I just think you roll with them and hope for the best,
Well,
right?
I mean, the other conversation had been about trading for a veteran that's on the last year of their deal, like Kirk Cousins with the Vikings, Ryan Tannehill with the Titans. And again, I mean, we talked about the AFC South and how they're all knotted up, so it's anyone's division at this point. Vikings were able to get their first win yesterday. I don't see those options being there for the Jets, but as far as the other teams being willing to work with them. But again, we still got a long way to go till we hit that trade deadline, so anything is possible. And the Jets at 1-3 really can only take one or two more losses, and then you're like, they're for sure out of that playoff contention.
Yeah, I think based on last night's performance, the best hope for the Jets is that Zach Wilson, who almost beat the Chiefs, is that Zach Wilson plays like that minus the huge mistake at the end of the game. I mean, he fumbled the snap because his eyes are up, not looking at the snap. Just little bitty things that are huge. Good NFL quarterbacks don't do that. Mediocre NFL quarterbacks don't make that play late in the game. But before that, he played like a good NFL quarterback.
Well, he was outplaying Patrick Mahomes
Yeah,
for a
step in
majority
the
of
right
game.
direction. Now, I give all that credit to the Jets defense. That's terrific and really got after Mahomes in that game. But maybe there's some hope now. That division's not going to make it easy on them, other than the Patriots, who look god-awful at this point. But we'll see. Maybe, just maybe, he can play more like that and less like the guy we saw the last couple of weeks, and be a little bit more sympathetic, like Cobra Kai Johnny Lawrence, as opposed to Karate Kid Johnny Lawrence.
Sweep the leg, Johnny.
Sweep the leg. Always sweep the leg. No mercy. No mercy will be shown on tomorrow's show. We're going to get after it. We're going to bang hats. We're going to have some fun. When you're here, your family. Hopefully that's not trademarked. We're back at it tomorrow. This is Hot Mike with Hutton and Withrow.
Puka Nakua.